manager in 2004, and I don't want you to go into any long details about this, but did you write a letter to investors raising concerns about the impact of tariffs, writing that, quote, tariffs are inflationary? Did you say that at that time, yes or no?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a New York Times article that, agrees that you said
New York
that.
Times.
Then last summer, when you testified before a Senate committee, you said, and I quote, "There is no inflation. Tariffs are not being passed on to consumers." You were quite definitive and even claimed that critics had, quote, "tariff derangement syndrome." Well, those comments are at odds with the statement you made to investors that tariffs are inflationary. Again, I want to be clear, so just let me ask you, are tariffs inflationary, yes or no?
According to the San Francisco Federal Reserve, with 150 years of data,
Yes or no?
Tariffs do not cause inflation. San Francisco Federal
Well,
Reserve,
last November, as the
Congresswoman,
Trump administration finally began to realize
150 years
that
of data.
affordability issues in America are not a hoax, you told Fox News that the government was going to reduce tariffs on goods like coffee and bananas, and that doing so would, quote, bring the prices down very quickly. Mr. Secretary, why was that announcement even necessary? If tariffs aren't inflationary, and as you and the president like to say, are paid for by foreign countries, by the foreign country, a tariff on coffee or bananas shouldn't raise the price of either for American consumers. Well, that's the Trump logic, but that isn't reality. It did raise prices across the board, and you know it. I think you knew back in July also. The real question is, why would you even impose a tariff on a good that a country doesn't grow or make, as that would only serve to punish the American consumer? Now, as you know, this committee has taken a bipartisan approach to addressing another real affordability crisis. Housing. Rents are too high. There aren't enough houses. However, one clear reason that the housing crisis has grown worse is that you and the rest of the Trump administration levied tariffs on housing production goods like lumber and steel, as well as appliances. These tariffs will result in half.
Lumber is
reclaiming my time. You don't get to talk.
Lumber is at a
Reclaiming my
5-year
time.
low, Congresswoman.
Reclaiming my time.
Let's just have the facts, ma'am.
Reclaiming my time. Thank you. However, one clear reason that the housing crisis has gone worse is that you and the rest of the Trump administration levied tariffs on housing production goods like lumber and steel, as I said, as well as appliances. These tariffs will result in 500,000 fewer homes built at a time when we need more homes built, not less. Trump single-handedly made housing more expensive. And once again, you know it, as Axios has reported that you were planning to lift tariffs on housing production goods. In addition, the unlawful campaign the Trump administration has waged with ICE and Border Patrol, terrorizing American communities, has also harmed home construction across America. So I ask you, Secretary Bessent, will you be the voice of reason in the administration and urge Trump to stop waging a war on American consumers and on housing or affordability and putting the economy at risk? Yes or no? You don't have to explain.
Representative
Will you be the voice? Will you be the voice? Will you be the voice? Will you be the voice of reason? Will you be the voice of reason?
A study
Yes or
from
no?
Wharton University
Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time. Reclaiming my time.
Was the mass unfettered immigration.
Mr. Chair, will you let him know that when I ask him
time does belong to the
housing
gentlewoman
stock.
from California.
10 and 20 million immigrants
Can you
took
shut
up the
him up?
housing stock of working Americans, and can you maintain some level of dignity?
Gentleman's time has expired.
No, my time has not expired.
Your time has expired. And the
The
gentleman,
gentleman took up my time. I think you should recognize that, Mr. Chair.
the gentlewoman's
He took
time
up
has
my time.
expired. The gentlewoman's time has
Well,
expired.
if you want
Chair,
to,
parliamentary
if you want to protect him,
The chair
Mr.
recognizes the vice chairman of the
Mr.
committee,
Chair.
Mr.
If you
Heisinger.
want to
Parliamentary inquiry.
go right ahead, but I would not expect you to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will grant very briefly any time that you feel like you need to address anything.
Again, I think the ranking member does not understand.
Mr. Secretary, I'm sorry, the gentleman will suspend. There's a parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Sherman?
Mr. Chair, will you enforce the rules of this committee so that the time belongs to the questioner and prevent filibusters from taking time away? And if those filibusters by the witness do take time away, will you allocate additional time?
I will enforce the 5-minute rule. The
I
gentleman
want my time back.
The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
I grant briefly anything that you feel you need to address.
I believe the ranking member does not understand the definition of generalized inflation versus one-time price increases. I would also note that housing, especially for working Americans, a Wharton study has shown that the mass unfettered immigration, adding 10 to 20 million new people demanding housing, Congresswoman, is what caused a great deal of housing inflation for working Americans. So you and the Biden administration should be ashamed.
Which is also why we are seeing rents. There was just a recent media on this. Rents are going down partially because of that enforcement. So Mr. Secretary.
Yes, it is supply and demand continues to work.
I've got a number of issues I got to hit. Very briefly here on FSOC, I need to talk then Burma and 3%. You talked about with the chairman about regulators using tailored market approach tools. How are you ensuring that FSOC's current work continues to prioritize activity-based, transparent, analytically rigorous approach grounded in cost-benefit analysis and coordination with functional regulators when evaluating potential risks in non-bank financial markets?
That is done primarily for small banks through the Office of the Controller of the Currency and the FDIC. And those chairs are intent on tailoring the rules for small banks so that we do not have another 50% decrease in Main Street lending.
All right, thank you. You outlined as part of the 4 goals, protecting, number 2 was protecting from cyber attacks. We have seen a rise in those cyber attacks and scam centers in Burma. And I applaud you and Treasury for some of your work in that, including sanctioning North Korean individuals, selling weapons to the Burmese military regime, as well as the Democratic Korean Benevolent Army, a Burmese army group that has organized these scam centers. However, last week it was reported that Iran was secretly shipping vast amounts of jet fuel in Burma. And I need to move through this quickly here, but that's why last year I introduced a bipartisan legislation that would specifically require the president to determine whether to impose stronger blocking sanctions on Myanmar Oil and Gas, Myanmar Economic Bank, and foreign persons operating in the jet fuel sector of the Burmese economy. I read recently that Treasury responded to Reuters' report by noting that Iran's quest for, quote, new markets is a sign that President Trump's policies are working, which I would agree. I'm also aware that Burma's military leaders have attempted to gain favor with the president, especially when it comes to lowering tariffs levied on his country. This is something that simply cannot happen. I represent a significant Rohingya population and know that the active bombing that is going on is unacceptable. And I believe we must continue to impose strict sanctions on the Burmese military rulers. What tools can Treasury use to punish both Iran and Burma for violating both U.S. and other Western country sanctions?
Well, with respect to Iran, President Trump, upon entering office, instructed U.S. Treasury to implement a maximum pressure campaign, and we saw the fruits of that campaign in December as the Iranian economy has collapsed. Yep. We had a large bank collapse there. The central bank was forced to bail it out, created inflation, and the brave Iranian people have taken to the streets. We continuously monitor trade between two countries like that. The good news would be Iran has a significant shortage of dollars to buy, whether it is weapons or goods for the people, or to pad the Swiss bank accounts of the Iranian regime.
We've got to keep the pressure up on Iran, but also that pressure on the Burmese junta, please. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I did not thank you in public for your discussion of a desire to lower the deficits to 3% of the GDP. I've introduced, along with 14 of my colleagues from the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum that I chair with Congressman Scott Peters out of California, that urges the House to achieve this 3% goal by 2030, a tangible, achievable goal that is desperately needed, and we're building consensus here in the House. I know you and the administration take the ticking debt bomb seriously, and I hope that to continue this conversation with you. I don't know if you can, in 10 seconds,
I look
address
forward to
the 3%.
working with you on that, and I would note that the deficit to GDP calendar year 2024, 7%, highest, not at war, not in recession. Calendar 2025, down to 5.4%.
Gentleman's
I
time
yield
has
back.
expired.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, our ranking member of our Capital Markets Subcommittee. Mr. Sherman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to agree with the gentleman from Michigan that we need to impose those sanctions on the Myanmar regime and protect, of course, the Rohingya minority to the extent we can. FSOC has to define what is systemic. I, for one, think that we shouldn't be focusing on the assets, but rather the liabilities. We didn't have a problem in 2008 because the banks had too many assets. We had a problem because they had too many liabilities. So I don't see how most...
Congressman, that's incorrect. Ben Bernanke, then Fed chair, said, could you please tell me what these assets are?
I'm going to reclaim my time. Regardless of that, I'm going to ask you whether you... not going to ask you to agree with me. I'm going to ask you to agree with your predecessor, Secretary Mnuchin. During the first Trump administration, that Secretary Mnuchin promulgated interpretive guidance that prioritized an activities-based approach to systemic risk regulation over an entity approach. Secretary Bessent, you have indicated that you want to kick off a review of FSOC's activities and processes. The FSOC Improvement Act, led by my colleague, Dr. Foster, which I've co-sponsored, as you know, would codify an activities-based approach to systemic risk regulation. Does the FSOC plan to revert to the 2019 guidance of the first Trump administration regarding a definition of a SIFI?
Yes, we prefer an activities-based approach rather than an institutional-based approach.
Thank you. I want to pick up on the ranking member's comments about whether tariffs cause inflation. You know, economists can say when the price of something goes up by 20%, that isn't inflation. It's a one-time price increase. But out in my district, when the price of something goes up by 20%, we call that unaffordability. And to say it's not inflation is sophistry. I'll point out that every time Democrats had regulations that increased a company's cost, people in this room said that's going to cause inflation. Well, tariffs clearly have to be paid by companies, and if environmental costs are passed through, you can be sure tariffs are passed through. The ranking member asked the question, why a tariff on coffee and bananas? I think the answer is obvious: to make our tax system more regressive, to pay for the big, bad, beautiful bills, cuts in taxes for billionaires, and to fund ICE. I used to head the largest sales tax agency in this country, and we knew the sales tax was regressive, but we knew it would be even more regressive if we imposed sales taxes on food. And that is what you do with a tariff on bananas and coffee. Mr. Secretary, we lived through the bailouts of 2008. When powerful men lose money, they now want a government bailout. Does the Treasury Department or the various components of the FMOC have the authority to bail out Bitcoin?
Could you please elaborate? What exactly does bail out Bitcoin
Okay,
mean,
could you
Congressman? That's a
instruct the
very-
banks of this country to buy Bitcoin, or change banking regulations so that they are encouraged to do so in terms of the reserves that they're otherwise required to have?
Again, that within the context of asset diversification within banks, they could hold many assets.
They can, and there are different, but do you have the authority to order banks to buy Bitcoin or to invest U.S. tax dollars in Bitcoin or Trump coin?
I am Secretary of the Treasury. I do not have the authority to do that, and as Chair of FSOC, I do not have that authority.
So we're not going to see our tax dollars invested in crypto assets?
Well, why would a private bank be your tax dollars, Congressman?
Excuse me, I'm now asking about the money of our taxpayers, which you manage as Secretary of the Treasury. Is it going to be deployed into crypto assets?
We are retaining seized Bitcoin.
That's not exactly taxpayer money. You collect a lot of taxes this month?
No, that is an asset of the U.S.
It's an asset of the U.S.
It was government.
And are you going to invest any?
And I will point out,
Mr. Secretary, reclaiming my time, are you going to invest?
From
the
California
asset
stop.
seizure, that $1 billion of Bitcoin was seized, $500 million was retained, and that $500 million has become over $15 billion.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma, the chair of our Monetary Policy Task Force, Mr. Lucas, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary, for being here today. You've said that the current deposit insurance framework is a vulnerability for the banking system, that there is a competitive imbalance that favors large banks, and that this increases the risk of bank runs and erodes depositor confidence. Can you talk more about a targeted expansion of deposit insurance for non-interest-bearing transaction accounts, and would that strengthen financial stability within the system?
Congressman, thank you for that very important question, because it is my belief, because there is the belief that big banks, the depositors, will not lose money. During a financial crisis, as we saw in 2023, assets leave small banks. And much of that is what is known as the payroll account. So I think it is very important for small banks to have one non-interest-bearing account that can have a much higher level of insurance so that they are able to retain deposits during a stress period. This is one of the reasons that we have seen assets leave small banks. It is one of the reasons that we have seen 50% of small banks disappear.
Continuing along this line of inquiry, Mr. Secretary, a robust banking system with healthy banks of all sizes reduces systematic risk across the entire system. Why is it important that Congress act now on targeted deposit insurance reform, not only for Main Street, but also our financial stability?
Well, again, deposit volatility, which is what you're referring to, is deposits moving during a stress time, does not benefit anyone in the long run.
And one more question on this perspective. Congress should look at giving FDIC authority to raise the coverage level for non-interest-bearing transaction accounts to an appropriate amount that is data-driven and put smaller institutions on a level playing field with larger banks. How would our banking system be safer with a narrow, targeted expansion, such as the one I've suggested?
Again, it would permit the small and community banks to continue competing. It would get credit to our Main Street, and it would stem deposit flight during a period of stress, which is one of the most, or one of the biggest threats to financial stability.
Focusing on a slightly different subject. Sometimes something I've focused on as chairman of the task force on Treasury and monetary resilience has been strengthening market stability and liquidity. We saw occasional bouts of Treasury market volatility last year. How would reforms to banking regulations like the liquidity coverage ratio and stress tests incentivize market intermediation for banks and improve market stability?
Again, Congressman, wonderful question, that it brings more of our Treasury market onshore. And as you said, there were periods of stress last year. The market successfully navigated those. At the end of January, we had the third highest volume in the Treasury market, and the bid-ask spreads, very important for the financial well-being of the American people who are invested in money market funds, in bond funds, in their retirement funds. They have stayed right in the center line, and we are at a 5-year low in bond market volatility.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, the ranking member of our Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Meeks, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Bessent, if I'm not mistaken, you were working in the financial service industry during the late 1980s, correct?
I was.
Thank you. And well, I'm wondering, do you recall or you're knowledgeable of the Keating 5 scandal back then?
Yes, sir, and I will point out that I was.
I don't want to.
No. I will point out that
Limited time. I have limited time.
I identified.
The gentleman
my
is from,
time.
Mr. Secretary, it's the gentleman from
just
New
asked
York's
you a
time.
question. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows, who doesn't know, that the Keating 5 scandal involved 5 U.S. senators accused of pressuring the Federal Home Loan Bank Board to expedite and give more consideration to the case of Charles Keating, Jr., who ran the California-based Lincoln Savings and Loans. It led to a 14-month investigation unveiling how 5 U.S. senators and staff ended up with more than $1 million in contributions, 4 trips to the Bahamas, and all expenses paid stays at resort hotels. Following the scandal, the industry saw sweeping regulatory changes that was launched by then-President George H.W. Bush. Now, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you can agree conflicts of interest and improper influence by U.S. elected officials over bank regulators weaken supervisory independence and ultimately impose massive losses on consumers and taxpayers. I think that we can all agree upon that. And as we know, the basic lessons from the post-Keating reforms still applies today when the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the OCC, is deciding to get a bank charter. I think we can stimulate that. Now, Mr. Bessent, as our nation's treasurer, I'm sure you also know that a foreign-linked investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates government quietly bought about half of the Trump family's crypto company, World Liberty Financial. And at the very same time, the President of the United States was dealing with that country on foreign policy. Now, Eric Trump, the president's son and co-founder of World Liberty Financial, said, and I quote, "I'm not going to get into who the investors are, but I've got some pretty meaningful investors," end of quote. Lack of transparency. And it didn't end there. When Trump fans brought the tokens, they thought they were getting the deal of a century. But what they didn't know was that only Trump and his sons had the sole power to decide who can sell the token and when. Today, the price of the token has fallen over 50%, and the Trump fans who bought the token are now begging to get out. Now, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. You can see it for yourself on the World Liberty Financial Discussion Forum, yourself, Mr. Secretary. So this is no longer just about a shady crypto deal or a possible gift when a foreign-linked investor is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a company controlled by the president's family, and at the same time, this president is conducting foreign policy with that country. You know what that causes or creates? It creates a national security concern. So, I'm not going to ask much of you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to know whether you will commit today to pause and heighten the scrutiny of any bank charter or licensing application at the OCC connected to the World Liberty Financial until all of these conflicts of interest and foreign influence reviews are completed and shared with the United States Congress. All I need to know is, will you halt it and do a complete investigation and scrutiny of this licensing application? Oh, yeah, the answer is yes or no.
No, Congressman,
All you have to answer
the
is yes or no.
OCC is an independent entity, and I would know, Congressman,
so that- I take that-
in
I take that as a
2006,
no.
you traveled to Venezuela
I
to
take
Hugo
that as a no.
Chavez on behalf of
I
your
take that
donor,
as a
on
no.
behalf of your
You
donor.
do not want to answer that
I was
question.
sentenced to 110
I take
years
that
in
as a
jail
no.
For a $7 billion
Gentleman's
contract.
time
I'm
has
asking you to
expired.
do your
Ask
responsibility
Secretary.
as Secretary of the
Road
Treasury.
into a Venezuelan.
You do not.
Mr. Meeks,
Will you?
time has expired.
You
No,
cannot
no,
erase
tell the
what you
witness,
did in
He's the one that went
2006.
past your time, Mr. Chairman.
No, and
he did not answer my question, and he wouldn't pass the
Mr.
time.
Meeks. He had 6 seconds left to try to answer your question, and the
It was
time
a yes or
expired.
no. It was a yes or no answer. I asked him, will he? No, it was
Gentlemen,
yes
the
or
chair
no.
recognizes
OCC
the
is an
gentleman.
independent
Stop
Mr.
covering
Bessent.
for the president.
Yeah, well.
Stop being his flunky.
Yeah, and
Gentlemen.
He's talking to me. I'm responding
your
back to him.
2006 trip to Venezuela.
Neither
Why
one-
don't
Stop
why don't you
covering
tell
for
your
the
Secretary
president. Don't be a
that?
flunky. Work for the
Mr.
American
Secretary,
people.
Mr. Meeks,
trip to
Mr.
Venezuela?
Meeks,
Work for the American people.
And maybe
Don't
you're
be
going-
a
maybe you're
cover-up
going to-
for a mob.
Maybe you're going to
As
see your
long as
friend
he talks,
Nicholas
you talk.
I
Maduro
will.
in
gentleman is
Brooklyn
not
prison.
recognized. Mr. Bessent, please. I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Secretary, welcome to the Financial Services Committee. I'm delighted that you're here. Mr. Secretary, we've talked with you about a broad range of things, not necessarily related to FSOC and your chairmanship there, but I would like to, if I can, talk with you something about the word public confidence. And the word public confidence does have a lot to do with the financial stability of the country. There are reports in social media that have shown, and I don't want to put you in a position where you cannot answer this because of anything that you've learned in Minnesota with the $9 billion worth of fraud. But there are social media accounts that show people who are at a Minneapolis airport with baggage full of up to $1 million cash attempting to exit the country. And I have engaged several people who have worked at Treasury to ask their opinion about that. Not the relationship between how they got the money, but just that it's going out of the country and following the law. Can you tell us or give this committee your viewpoints about people not using some other system, but taking cash up to $1 million through our airports to leave the country?
Yes, so that is a DHS TSA function. We, having learned of this, we are attempting to integrate our FinCEN better with those forms. What we are trying to do at Treasury via FinCEN is to keep money from being wired out of the country through what are called money service businesses. So we have issued a geographic targeting order bringing down the amount of reporting to $300 and also asking on the form, if someone is wiring money out of the country, are you receiving public benefits?
These are all very important issues, and as you did talk about, Department of Homeland Security does have a role in this. I would suggest to you that Treasury probably has a philosophy about the role of the American dollar in world economy, the stability that we have, the use of wanting to make sure that the dollar remains that dominant use. But I would tell you that I will be very interested if you have a working group on this of us making ourselves aware, because it is an issue to people who simply see social media.
We look forward to working with you on that, Congressman.
Thank you, Secretary. Mr. Secretary, as you have alluded to, and as the discussion here has been about banks, community banks, the ability that they have, you recognize, because you spoke directly to it, about the stress that they are placed under as opposed to bigger banks. Could you please talk to us about what you believe the role is of home ownership, which is increasingly a part of the political discussion and debate and discussions for members of Congress back home of solving our home ownership problem. And you've got almost a minute, boy, I'm giving you a lot of time, and interest rates as they correspond to people being able to buy their own homes.
Good, well, thank you. And I would note that I was also a banks and financial institutions analyst for 35 years and was instrumental in working with the government to bring down American Continental and Sun State Savings and Loans, which were the beneficiaries of the Keating Five. Getting small banks lending again, we need to get them back into the mortgage market. No one knows their communities like small banks. And that having moved into the larger system, the strength and breadth of the U.S. mortgage market is choice. And we have lost the choice in the small banks. And I think we need to get them back into the housing lending business. And we are seeing, it's a tragedy that the average first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. 40 years old.
Well, I had a discussion last night with the realtors about their importance in this process too. So I'd like to once again make sure we see community banks and realtors and home builders all have an interest in
Gentleman's
this.
time is
I want to thank the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman from Texas. Before we move on, I want to remind everyone participating today to uphold the House's rule of decorum. And I'd like to remind everybody to respect the 5-minute rule. And having been a witness before Congress before in my executive branch days, it is important to note that our members can spend their 5 minutes and never ask a question or not. It's their 5 minutes. So let's try to be mutually respectful of each other. And I now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, the ranking member of our Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Artificial Intelligence Subcommittee, Mr. Lynch, Massachusetts, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, based on early reports, and this is an analysis done by Public Citizen and subsequent news reports, when the Trump administration came into office, they immediately took steps to either halt, dismiss, or roll back over 100 enforcement actions and investigations against corporations in its first 2 months in office, with a very heavy concentration on financial services, consumer protection, and cryptocurrency, totaling over $3.1 billion in potential penalties avoided. Now, as a member of the Financial Services Oversight Council, is that a concern that you have raised within the council, all these immediate dismissals of cases against financial services firms?
Well, I think the Biden administration had an extinction.
Sir, please be responsive to my question.
I am trying, sir, and this back and forth is just eating your time, that the Biden administration had an extinction policy for crypto
This
assets.
is when Trump came into office. I'm going to go to the next question because your answers aren't, Mr. Chairman, the answers have to be responsive if we're going to have a serious hearing here.
Well, the questions have to be serious.
Well, those are 100 dismissals of cases that the Trump administration came in and executed in their first weeks in office, like that. All of a sudden, all these crypto cases went away. The SEC was dropping cases. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau dropping cases. And
well, sir,
look, you're on FSOC with all the heads of these agencies. This should be a serious question to you. Trust should be a serious question and a serious issue for the financial services industry, especially as the Secretary of the Treasury.
Well,
that's an important. No, this is my time. I haven't asked you any more questions. I haven't asked you any more questions,
It's the gentleman from Massachusetts.
I'm trying to get to my next question.
Could you speak a little louder? I can't hear you.
Yeah, okay. I might.
Mr. Secretary, let Mr. Lynch proceed with his time. Put 4 seconds back on the clock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Lynch.
I just want to do a comparison of the FSOC reports. Let's go back to 2024, and then we'll talk about the current report. In the previous report, the the members of FSOC expressed serious concerns related to potential risk to financial stability regarding the lack of explainability and high complexity of AI and the approaches that have a potential to heighten financial instability, especially in the areas of bias and discrimination in credit decisions. That was in 2024. Your report in 2025 focuses on removing regulatory impediments. So in 2024, we were concerned about consumer protections, and now, under your leadership, we're concerned with eliminating regulatory impediments. The dangers, and that was a report during a time where the chairman and I were co-chairs of an AI task force. Those dangers haven't gone away. In reality, those dangers are still as severe for the American consumer, but they are absent from FSOC's report. So it's obviously you've eliminated or dropped that priority as an issue for FSOC. So can you explain the change from protecting the consumer and now eliminating regulations?
We are charged with financial stability, and we are focused on leveraging AI strength and the financial system resilience, but with economic growth and a security lens.
On the issue of explainability, any concern about that in the use of AI in the financial services industry?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The issue of explainability, how when people apply for credit and are denied, we don't have the ability for AI to explain why they were denied. Is that a concern? I mean, we are talking about the trust within the financial services industry.
It could be a concern, but we don't view it as a priority for financial stability.
That's the truth. That's the truth. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman from Massachusetts yields back. I recognize the gentlewoman from Missouri, Ms. Wagner, who chairs our Capital Markets Subcommittee. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Bessent. I find your answers to be quite clear, substantive, and, as always, well-informed. Thank you for being here. Early, sir, in your tenure as Treasury Secretary, you said, and you touched on it here today, and I quote, "For the last 4 decades, Wall Street has grown wealthier than ever before, and it can continue to grow and do well. But for the next 4 years, it's Main Street's turn. It's Main Street's turn to hire workers. It's Main Street's turn to drive investment. And it's Main Street's turn to restore the American dream." And as chair of the Capital Markets Committee, I could not agree more, sir. For too long, outdated securities laws have limited everyday Americans' ability to invest in innovative startups. At the same time, the number of companies listed on public markets continues to shrink. And as a result, everyday Americans in Missouri's 2nd congressional district that I have the honor to represent have fewer opportunities to invest toward major life goals, including owning a home, paying for their children's education, or securing a dignified retirement. Main Street businesses across the Midwest and other regions of our country are overlooked as venture funding and capital raising opportunities remain largely concentrated on the coast. That is why I have made it a priority to facilitate capital formation and empower entrepreneurs and small businesses across America. Just weeks ago, Mr. Secretary, December 11th to be exact, the House passed my Invest Act, a bipartisan package of 22 bills focused on 3 goals: expanding access to capital for small businesses, increasing opportunities for everyday investors, and strengthening our public markets. Capital formation is the lifeblood of American economic growth and prosperity. Our capital markets are indeed the deepest and most liquid in the world, and the Invest Act will ensure that they remain among the greatest strengths for decades to come. I look forward to continuing to work with you and the administration to advance these priorities and unleash the power of our capital markets. Secretary Bessent, in your view, what are the largest barriers to capital formation for a small business?
Congresswoman, I look forward to working with you. And I think I would bifurcate that. Most small businesses are individuals. And
Correct.
for many individuals, we have learned that most of them, 38% of Americans, do not own equities. So with the Trump accounts, which will give every child $1,000 seed finance, every American will be invested in a low-cost index fund. Every American will have a share of our great innovative economy. For small businesses, it is often, I would say, it is a duality of regulatory and access to finance. Americans are entrepreneurial. We want to get out and form businesses. And I believe that with the confidence of being able to do that, and what President Trump's agenda has done, businesses now have tax certainty with the One Big Beautiful Bill, that 100% deductibility of equipment, of factories, and of ag structures. We have energy certainty with our energy dominance, and we have regulatory certainty as we are pulling back the regulatory morass that was highly harmful to both small and large business.
Absolutely. And as global competition for capital intensifies, the United States risks falling behind if our public markets also, I must say, remain costly or inaccessible for growing companies. How important is capital formation reform, like the reforms included in the INVEST Act? Again, 22 bipartisan bills that we brought to the floor with the support of 87 Democrats. How important are these reforms to maintaining U.S. economic leadership and long-term growth? Quickly, sir.
Congresswoman, they're vital, and what we have seen, as you correctly outlined, is since the early 2000s, the number of public companies available for Americans and indeed international investors to invest in has greatly diminished, and it has developed into a network of private assets.
Thank you. My time has expired. I have others that I will put forward for the record, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, who's the ranking member of our Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee. Mr. Green, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I ask that you recall Liberation Day, the day that President Trump announced tariffs. I ask that you recall that when he made this announcement, there was a sharp decline in the stock market. In fact, when he made the announcement, the NASDAQ experienced a 6% decline, the S&P 500 a decline of 11%. I ask that you also remember that some days later, the president announced that he was going to pause those tariffs. And when he indicated that he would pause the tariffs, the market then moved up. Do you recall these things, Mr. Secretary?
I recall them very well, Congressman.
Thank you. And I ask that you also recall, please, Mr. Secretary, that hours before the president announced the pause, he indicated by way of Truth Social, he has more than 50% ownership in Truth Social. It's a great time to buy DJT. That was his announcement on Truth Social. And in so doing, Truth Social had a value that moved up. In fact, Truth Social, which the president has a majority ownership, went up by $415 million. Now, here's what's interesting in this scenario. When he made that announcement and said it's a great time to buy DJT, that happens to be the symbol for his stock, DJT. I ask you kindly, and as one professional to another, Mr. Treasury Secretary, do you think that this should be investigated, the president's stock being linked to his Truth Social message, and that stock having gone up by some $415 million in a single day, and this is a stock that was doing very poorly prior to that, hadn't had a lot of success. Do you think that this should be investigated?
No, sir.
Kindly explain to me why we would not investigate the president making such an announcement as it relates to his stock and then reaping some $415 million as a potential capital.
Well, all Americans benefited from the rebound in the markets that day, and in fact, the rebound in the market after that was the fastest in market history.
Yes, it was. But here's what's interesting about your statement. You did not note, Mr. Secretary, that DJT had probably the sharpest increase on that day, 415 million, and that the president said buy DJT, and that's what happened.
I'm unfamiliar with the exact text. Did he say buy DJT?
Yes, sir.
He said
Yes, sir. Exact text.
now is a good time to buy and have a salutation DJT.
Yes, sir. DJT immediately following, now is a good time to buy.
Well, those are his initials, as you said.
They are his initials, but it's also, do you agree that those are the symbol, that's the symbol for his stock?
I believe it is.
Okay. And do you believe that such a thing done openly and notoriously should not be investigated? Is that what you're telling the American people?
Sir, I believe that anything that is widely disseminated is widely disseminated and available to everyone.
Well, it was available to everyone, but what he said related to his stock could relate to something else, but to his stock. And here's the point, Mr. Secretary. Here's the point. I believe that any other president making this kind of move is almost a hustle. I don't want to say that about the president, but making this kind of move would at least be investigated. If you're going to allow the president to do this openly and notoriously, $415 million, what you're doing is giving him a license to move markets at will, make announcements, and reap benefits. He is literally hustling the United States stock market. I yield back.
Gentleman's time is yield back. The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, Chairman of our Financial Institutions Subcommittee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you came here to testify about financial stability and threats to financial stability. I think what we're learning from this hearing, Mr. Secretary, is how much Trump derangement syndrome is a threat to emotional stability. There's been a lot of lectures directed at you today. Would you like to clarify anything or respond in any way to any of these lectures?
I would just like to say that financial stability analysis centered on identifying vulnerabilities in financial institutions or markets that might disrupt the provision of credit or liquidity, disrupt other sectors, and lead to significant losses across the financial stability. This is what FSOC is chartered to do.
Thank you. Secretary Bessent, I'd like to applaud President Trump and the Treasury Department for announcing Trump accounts. I do believe this will kickstart the American dream for children born between 2025 and 2028 with a $1,000 investment from the U.S. Treasury. And I'm personally grateful because my daughter, Virginia, was born in October and will be a beneficiary of these Trump accounts. Not only will this ensure that American children born in this time frame will participate in the deepest, most liquid capital markets in the world, but it importantly will also teach this new generation about the power of compound interest and will help them develop financial literacy skills which will make them owners and investors and will improve their financial outcomes throughout their lives. Can you touch on the impact of these Trump accounts and how it will help this new generation achieve financial independence? And as you talk about that, we have a mayor of New York that espouses socialism, members of Congress who espouse socialism. How will these Trump accounts impact this new generation of Americans' view of financial independence versus socialism?
Again, history would show that people who own a piece of the action do not want to bring down the system when you are part of the system. As I said, 38% of American households, they do not participate in the equity market. Many do, many directly, many through 401ks. But over time, the goal here should be to have everyone own a piece of the American economic engine. We at Treasury, working with many people, are going to work on financial literacy. This will be one of the greatest real-time experiments in history. You are bringing Wall Street to Main Street, and Wall Street will work for Main Street instead of the other way around.
Well, on behalf of my 3-month-old daughter, Virginia, and millions of American children, thank you to you and President Trump for bringing financial independence to the American people. I agree with you that economic stagnation is itself a threat to financial stability. That's why we're pushing this Main Street access to capital bill, which will provide for more de novo charters of community banks, the TIER Act, the Community Bank Regulatory Tailoring Act, which would modernize these statutory thresholds to remove the static nature of the thresholds and allow for more diversity and growth in financial institutions. Can you discuss how indexing these static regulatory thresholds will allow banks of all sizes to grow, and how that will in turn help financial stability?
Yep. So, Congressman, I've said very often that under the regulatory straitjacket that emerged, that pushed lending outside the traditional banking system, small banks became too small to succeed. And I think we have to fix that and tailor it to the risk for people who know their communities, who are concentrated geographically. And if you were in Iowa, you were concentrated in farming. If you were in Florida, you were likely concentrated in real estate and tourism, and we need to make adjustments.
And that will promote diversity in the financial system, which in turn will help with financial stability. Final question, Secretary Bessent. At the end of last year, President Trump signed into law the NDAA, which included my legislation, which will be overseen by the Treasury Department, the Comprehensive Outbound Investment National Security Act, also known as the Fight China Act. The COINS Act will ensure that Americans are not unknowingly funding the military-industrial complex of our adversaries by codifying and enhancing the Trump administration's existing outbound investment security program. Can you discuss the Treasury Department's new obligations under this bill, and how do you intend to implement it to prevent capital flows into Chinese military-industrial complex companies?
Well, I want to thank you for this important piece of legislation. It is another arrow in our quiver, and I can tell you, as I am the lead negotiator with China on the economic front, it is very useful for me to be able to say, well, I'm happy to refer things to the Hill.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Great to work with you on that. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired, and I recognize the ranking member of our Housing and Insurance Subcommittee, Mr. Cleaver of Missouri. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, this is an embarrassing kind of a hearing. I've been on this committee 21 years. We've had all kinds of conflict. In fact, I was in here when the Federal Reserve Chair, along with the Treasury Secretary, and many others came in to tell us what was going to happen if the Asian markets, when the Asian markets opened after the collapse of the economics of our nation. And I've learned that you can't make honey and sting at the same time. The question is whether we came here today to sting or whether we came here to talk about issues that are of importance to the nation. I got a little grandson, I hope. Well, he was in school today. I would hate for him to have seen this so far. What I would like to talk about is your opinion of the dual mandate, stable prices, maximum employment. I would like to get your philosophy on that issue. Is that the creators of the Federal Reserve, and then the mandate, Was that a mistake?
The Federal Reserve Act of 1913, which created the Fed, and then we have morphed into the dual mandate, and the dual mandate is a very delicate balance between maximizing economic growth while maintaining the low levels of inflation.
Well, so then you believe in, I'm assuming, the independence of the Federal Reserve?
I believe in the independence of the Federal Reserve, but I also believe in accountability.
I mean, can you explain how you put those two together?
Sure, I would welcome, we've seen these cost overruns at the Fed. The Fed has the independence of the Fed is based on its trust with the American people. And the Federal Reserve lost the trust of American people when it allowed the greatest inflation of 49 years to ravage working people in this country.
Mr. Secretary, so the people in the country, there was a poll or something? I mean, you're speaking of the American people as if there's some human being that had an opinion. I mean, either the Fed either the Federal Reserve is independent or it's not. Isn't that right? Isn't the logic right?
The Federal Reserve should be independent for monetary policy, and every other program it undertakes impinges on the monetary policy independence, whether it is cost overruns on a building, whether it is intruding in climate, whether it is offering political opinions.
Mr. Secretary, so you, being a member of the cabinet, you would advise the President of the United States to verbally and politically interfere with the decision-making of the Federal Reserve?
Well, it's his right, just as Senator Warren's right in September of '24 to say that they shouldn't cut 50 basis points, they should cut 75 basis points. Yeah. It's the right of everyone in here because, again, there is no appropriation for the Fed. The Fed has magic money and prints all its own money.
Yeah, I understand how the system is financed, the Federal Reserve, but Elizabeth Warren is not the President of the United States. And I'm sure, I mean, her comment was in newspapers on the news. I'm asking about the arguably the most influential human being on planet Earth.
Well, I will refer you to President Biden's last State of the Union, where he said, I believe the Fed is going to be cutting interest rates.
Mr. Secretary, can you tell me, please, what you advise the President to force the independent Federal Reserve to cut interest rates?
And I invite the Secretary to respond to the gentleman's question in writing. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, you're recognized. Mr. Williams is Chair of the House Small Business Committee. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here. I want to discuss the Main Street Capital Access Act, which strengthens local bank formation, allows community financial institutions to refocus on serving their customers, supporting small businesses, and improving affordability for Americans. The one-size-fits-all regulatory requirements are particularly harmful to community banks, which often lack the large compliance staffs and resources needed to absorb broad mandates. So to preserve competition and avoid consolidation of the banking sector, regulatory requirements must be tailored to the size and risk profile of each institution. You've touched a little bit at today. So a question would be, can you speak to the importance of tailoring and right-sizing regulations for community banks and the communities they serve, and how does a one-size-fits-all regulatory approach undermine the community-based lending model?
Again, Congressman, as I said, a banker from my home state of South Carolina with about $200 million in assets, so it'd be a very small bank, was told by a regulator she should run her business like Bank America. She has 3 compliance officers out of 17 employees. She knows everyone in her small community in South Carolina. So it is very important that we set the correct standards for the lending risk and for the business success, because our main streets will only succeed when these banks succeed.
Well, 99% of the businesses are small. They need these banks.
Yes, and and just to be clear, I've come under fire from the Wall Street Journal they called me a populist because I said that it's Main Street's turn, and I will note that it's called the Wall Street Journal, not the Main Street Journal.
Thank you. Two of my bills are included in our committee's Main Street Act. The first, the Merger Process Review Act, directs the Inspector General of the NCUA and federal banking agencies to examine the agency's merger review process to evaluate delay, reduction, efficiency, and transparency. The second, the Merchant Banking Modernization Act, would permit banks to hold merchant banking investments for up to 15 years, providing regulatory certainty and aligning federal investment rules with real-world timelines of small and medium-sized business projects that often take more than a decade to plan. So a question would be, Mr. Secretary, can you tell us what the benefits would be brought by greater clarity in merger review process? And next, how would allowing banks to hold merchant banking investments for longer periods contribute to growth for small and medium and businesses and the wider economy?
Again, regulatory certainty for any business, as you know, as an advocate for small business is important. And for small businesses who don't have legions of consultants, legions of lawyers, the regulatory certainty that is important, and the ability to grow through acquisition is also important. And we just want the regulators to put down the framework and stick to the framework, not to regulate through supervision.
Thank you for that answer. And finally, in the 2025 FSOC annual report, you noted that financial stability and economic growth are closely linked. You also observed that many financial and regulatory supervisory policies fail to consider their cumulative impact on economic growth, with new regulatory costs often evaluated in isolation. I hear this concern frequently from small businesses and financial institutions in my district in Texas, where layer after layer of regulatory burden from prior administrations led to millions of dollars and countless hours spent on compliance instead of serving customers and supporting their local communities, and they're hiring compliance officers before they hire loan officers. Again, it affects Main Street. So how do layers of regulations after small business growth with ultimately affect economic growth?
Again, it is a great retardant for economic growth. And I believe that if we were to go back and look at what's happened, Karen Pettigrew, a progressive, believes that this regulation of small banks has been a real problem. And she calls the Fed the engine of inequality, and a lot of the regulation, the burdensome regulation, and has come out of the Federal Reserve, but also the FDIC and the OCC. And I think removing that can, again, get Main Street lending going again.
Thank you. I've got 34 seconds left. Would you like to have any of that?
I would like to add that under this administration, we are pushing for the financial system, the regulated financial system, to get back on an even, safe, sound, and smart level through deregulation, but not deregulation at any cost, but deregulation that will help the American small business, the American consumer, and those who would like to become homeowners.
Thank you for watching Main Street. I yield my time back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member of our Financial Institutions Subcommittee, Dr. Foster from Chicago. You're recognized 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our witness. I mentioned in my opening remarks our recent letter to FSOC asking them to look seriously at the risks of the deflation of the AI circular investment bubble, which is something you obviously read about every time you open up any financial journal anywhere these days. I understand there was a similar letter sent recently by the Senate Democrats that received a similarly dismissive response, basically recognizing that, yeah, this is part of what we're supposed to be doing, but provided zero specifics on what you're actually doing. So how many people do you have that are actually assigned to looking at the risk of this circular financing, these off-balance sheet entities, the securitization, all of the parade of terribles that wrecked our economy last time and are looking to threaten it again? So how many people are actually working on this, and when can we expect to hear from what they've concluded?
Again, we are constantly evaluating.
How many people? How many people? Could you answer my point? How many people are actually working on that problem?
It is in all agencies. It is an all-agencies
So,
effort.
no answer. Okay, I understand. They're not willing to give me a number on who's actually working on it. And when do you?
I could say 2,000, but that wouldn't be correct.
That's right, it wouldn't be.
Because some people may devote an hour a day, some people may devote 80 hours a week.
All right, when
So,
can we hear
and-
something specific? When can we expect to hear something
In the
specific?
interest of getting back to you and a change in tone, I am happy to send you a reply.
Okay, I would appreciate something with a lot more detail than something we got from the under assistant acting, whatever it was. All right. Also, well, last time we spoke, I asked you a simple question that I didn't get an answer to, which is, does this administration support a strong dollar policy or a weak dollar policy? And frankly, as far as I've been able to tell, you're just all over the map on this. So could you answer the question just simply, do you support a strong dollar policy or a weak dollar policy? And how would you, score your, whichever way you're trying to go, how are you doing?
We always support a strong dollar policy.
Okay, that's interesting because, as last time we spoke, I presented a couple of graphs which presented the interesting fact that every time you put a Republican in charge of in the presidency, that two things have happened: that the dollar has gotten weaker and that manufacturing employment has dropped. And this has happened just during every Republican president in our lifetime, and the reverse has happened every Democratic president. The dollar has strengthened, actually achieved your objective instead of just talking about it. And since the time of that, actually, I think this plot here was the one we had then when the dollar was only 8%. I think it's down about 10.5% now, so you're continuing down the traditional path.
I'm sorry, which index are you using
DXY.
for the dollar?
I think it's DXY year on year.
Yeah,
And I think it's, the last time I looked at it, it was roughly down 10.5%.
And you have the president on there, but under President Clinton, it would be.
I'm not talking about.
It would be my belief that it was Speaker Gingrich and what he did.
I was just talking about the president who has control.
Working with the Clinton administration
I
together.
understand.
Is Dr. Foster's time?
Yeah. But you agree it is a historic fact that during those presidencies, manufacturing employment dropped and the dollar got weaker during Republicans without exception.
I haven't seen the data, so I can't.
I
agree with you.
presented it to you on a graph. It's my understanding, actually, that later on in that hearing, after I'd left to attend a different hearing, that you said some rather negative things about the data, and that as a finance professor, that you would have, I think, given it an F, was, I believe, your word. And so that, all right, so now I'm not a finance professor, I'm a manufacturer, okay? But I understand that the first rule of a manufacturer is you don't piss off your customers, which seems to be something that your administration just revels in doing, internationally especially. And so I think that it's easy for me to understand why manufacturing employment has continued to drop. That ever since Liberation Day, we have seen a continuous decline in manufacturing employment, which was one of your number one promises.
Congressman, as a manufacturer, you would know that I can't snap my fingers and create factories. So there is a building process that is well underway. I could send you the chart on the factory groundbreaking.
I understand, and the fact that we have been historically a low tariff nation is, I believe, responsible for the really extraordinary economic growth over the last decade of the United States compared to, say, the EU, which was a high tariff regime. And now we are joining the EU
I believe that we've
going down that
exported
road.
jobs to China, so
No,
you were touching on a lot of CCP talking points.
I think as a manufacturer who's kept jobs in the Midwest, I think I have a little more credibility in finance.
Gentleman's time has expired. Does the gentleman want something inserted in the record? Would you like that document inserted in the record? Without objection, be included in the record. Gentleman recognized is from Georgia. Mr. Loudermilk, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Vice Chairman of our Financial Institutions Subcommittee.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you again, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here. But before I get to my questions, I want to build on something that Mr. Lucas had talked about. This committee held a hearing in November about deposit insurance, and we had an honest conversation about the need to maintain depositor confidence, the potential costs and unintended consequences, and how we need more data before making reforms. This issue is just too important to mess up, and I hope we can continue to talk about it in a thoughtful and data-driven way. And now, onto my own questions here. Secretary Bessent, the Bank Secrecy Act, or BSA reporting modernization, is very long overdue and is required by the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2020, otherwise known as AMLA. Increasing these outdated BSA reporting thresholds is, in my opinion, a critical component of this modernization effort. The currency transaction report requires banks to report cash transactions that exceed $10,000. That threshold has remained the same since 1972. This low-value threshold has in recent years led financial institutions to file over 20 million reports on their customers annually. And as I brought up during our recent hearing, $10,000 in 1972 was enough to buy 2 brand-new Corvettes, just to give an illustration of how inflation has affected these CTR filings. The vast majority of these reports are filed on law-abiding citizens conducting innocent transaction. And I agree with something that you've stated, that banks need to be focused on their BSA reporting, or they need to focus their BSA programs on real illicit finance risk, and that focus on higher value activities would also better serve our law enforcement and national security objectives. A few weeks ago, we had a markup in this committee and passed my bill, the Financial Reporting Threshold Modernization Act, that would responsibly raise the CTR and SAR thresholds while ensuring these reports are still useful for law enforcement. As part of your community, or your commitment to implement AMLA, will you use your authority to modernize and streamline the outdated reporting rules and increase the thresholds?
Yes, Congressman, we are studying this carefully. We look forward to working with you on it. The other thing that we are trying to do is to use common sense for geographical targeting, that we can lower thresholds with what's called a geographical targeting order for areas where we see disturbing trends like the southern border or in Hennepin and Farley counties, St. Paul, Minneapolis.
Right. And I believe under the program, those exceptions exist to give flexibility. You've talked about the importance of creating an effective BSA program that allow financial institutions to focus on high-risk activities other than just focused examinations on paperwork. How can you ensure that our financial institutions can focus on real illicit finance risks? And do you plan to consult them and law enforcement throughout your process?
Yes, we have done a very iterative process, especially with the small banks. And we've had numerous visits at Treasury. Our FinCEN group has been out on the road regionally asking for best practices, and we are working to incorporate to get the right mix of enforcement and common sense.
Well, that's good to hear, because after spending almost 30 years in the IT sector, especially with data security, I've equated to the way the system is right now as looking for a needle in the haystack, where the government's default is always, well, let's just make the haystack bigger, when I believe we should make the haystack smaller so it's easier to detect the fraudulent players. Do you believe that a modernized, effective BSA regime would hinder or undermine law enforcement if we were to modernize it?
Again, if it were done in a very smart way that optimizes looking for criminal activity, not at all.
And that's really the direction I think we should be going. Eliminate the noise so we can focus on where the bad players actually are. Mr. Secretary, when can Congress expect to see the Treasury's proposed changes to the BSA program?
Congressman, I'll get back to you on that, but we are working on it with all deliberate speed.
Okay, and stand ready to help in any way that we can, and we appreciate your efforts and your service. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Georgia yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Mr. Himes of Connecticut, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Mr. Secretary, over here. Good to have you with us today. Secretary, in February of last year, during your tenure as acting director of the CFPB, you instructed the staff to suspend all rulemaking, litigation, communications, and enforcement actions. One of the rules that was in process at CFPB was a rule that would have capped credit card late fees at $8 for large issuers. I understand there's an agency process. Do you have a personal view as to the wisdom of an $8 cap on late fees?
I do not.
You have no view? Okay. The president recently proposed a 10% cap on credit card interest rates. That's caused a certain amount of interest in this institution because presumably it would require legal action. So as Treasury Secretary, what are the plus and minuses of that proposal? Do you have a personal view on the wisdom of that proposal?
The president is interested in affordability for the American people, and I think his view is that banks have done very well, and that by capping the rate for 1 year, it would give the American people the chance to recover from the horrible Biden inflation of 22%.
We were both in the finance business for a long time. Is there any possibility, any risk that such a cap would actually have a pretty constrictive effect on the availability of credit, especially to subprime borrowers?
Again, I think that would be very important to examine as it's being put in. But Congressman, what we've seen over time is credit cards used to compete on what was known as APR, the financing rate, and now they compete on rewards. And what we have seen is that the APR, as you said, the subprime borrowers are paying higher APR, and the upper-end borrowers are getting more rewards. So maybe there is a calculus here on how to diminish the rewards and cut the APR.
When you were asked a similar series of questions, you gave a similarly careful answer, but you said that there were bad actors in the, I think you said you were referring to credit card companies. Who are those bad actors?
I'm not going to name them.
So you'll tell us that they exist, but you won't tell the Congress who they are so that we might undertake some oversight.
I think you have very large investigative committees.
Okay, let me shift gears here. So many, many years ago, working with then colleagues John Carney and John Delaney, we put together a proposal for the removal from conservatorship of the GSEs. Last fall, as you'll undoubtedly recall, there was a roundtable held at Treasury around an issue that is really critical, which is housing and its affordability, and the fact that we need to build a whole lot more housing. The conclusion from that roundtable, as I understood it, was really one theme, which is do no harm. Over the past year, the President and Director Pulte, however, have tweeted a host of utterly chaotic proposals for the GSEs, including an immediate IPO, 50-year mortgages, ending special purpose credit programs, rapidly exiting the conservatorship, stripping away the GSE's housing goals. I could go on and on and on. Mr. Pulte seems to have appointed himself the inquisitor of people like Letitia James and Adam Schiff. And apart from making a political point here, I'm trying to point out that we have a crisis in this country around housing affordability. The HUD Secretary was in here the other day using terms like, I'm going to encourage the building of additional housing. So my question for you in my final minute, what should we be doing right now with respect to the GSEs so that the GSEs can create a lot less risk for the American people than they represent in the conservatorship, but so that they are a vibrant part of an expanding housing growth sector?
Good. So, Congressman, I would point out that the market is the ultimate arbiter, and the spread between mortgages and treasuries, despite your statements, is the lowest that it's been in many, many years. So
yeah, but that's because the mortgages are effectively guaranteed by the federal government. That's not surprising. That's trivial. But my question is, what should we be doing right now?
But the spread is lower than it was this time last year, and it was guaranteed last year.
Let me repeat my question, Mr. Secretary. You're an expert in the field. What should we be doing right now to assist in the production of additional housing?
It is a very complicated question, but the most important thing that has happened is we now see mortgages touched a 3-year low in January. So I think getting down the payments and, again, moving toward Fannie and Freddie eventually leaving conservatorship, and our North Star
Gentleman's time has expired.
been that the spreads cannot widen in any trend.
Gentleman's time has expired.
It's okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman from Connecticut. Gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, who chairs our National Security Subcommittee, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for your leadership at Treasury. Like the markets, I'm comforted and reassured by your leadership there, so thank you, and I hope you keep continuing the excellence that you've delivered for this first year in the job. You know, the Export-Import Bank has played an increasingly important role in strengthening U.S. supply chains, and certainly doing that has been a big focus of this administration with a whole host of policies. Given China's dominant position in many critical mineral supply chains and the bank's expanding use of financing tools to address these vulnerabilities, does the Export-Import Bank need additional capital or authorities to scale its support for supply chain resilience?
I believe that John Yakonovich would come to you. He's doing a fantastic job, as the Exim Bank is overall, and it is the linchpin toward our move toward regaining our sovereignty with not only critical minerals, but will be semiconductors, medicines, steel. So anytime Exim Bank comes forward and asks for more money for national security, I cannot stress that enough. At FSOC, we are talking about economic security and national security are the same.
Yeah, thank you for that, and we'll be meeting this week, frankly, to talk about just that. So we need to reauthorize it, and I think that's things that we want to take into consideration. What additional capital, what additional authorities do they need? And that leads into the Defense Production Act. In the most recent NDAA, certain Defense Production Act authorities were shifted to the Department of Defense. So given that DPA authorities have historically been housed at Treasury to address supply chain vulnerabilities across the entire economy, and not just defense needs, should the primary DPA authorities remain within Treasury to make sure we get a whole-of-economy approach?
Well, we are working well with DOW, and I can tell you that the defense priorities are the same across the economy, and it's really it starts with critical minerals, and I believe DOW is leading that along with Exim Bank.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as we work to reauthorize that and modernize it, this will be the first modernization since since COVID. And we've seen the expanding use and how the administration's made such a focus on our trade policy and reshoring. So I think the debate and reauthorization, modernization of Defense Production Act, I think brings coherence to what has been a major focal point for the administration. So thanks for your leadership there. You know, lastly, as Mr. Foster was trying to tout the benefits of communist money, I appreciate you calling him out on that and rejecting it. And frankly, during the Biden administration, the Federal Reserve posted positions. They were literally recruiting developers to develop a central bank digital currency, including, a quote, senior crypto architect role dedicated to CBDC development. Are you aware of any ongoing government or Federal Reserve efforts to develop a U.S. central bank digital currency?
Within the administration, absolutely not. President Trump has made it clear that a central bank digital currency is anathema to the creation of the U.S. as a digital powerhouse. I can't speak for what goes on at the Fed, but I would assume that they would not be part of that either.
Yeah, I hope so, because not only has the president been clear on that, he issued an executive order on it and said that we will not develop a central bank digital currency. And of course, that applies to the whole executive branch. Does that mean it applies to the Federal Reserve?
I would say that the Federal Reserve has been very cooperative in terms of the regulation, and they're a bit of forward thinking with the Genius Act, what's happening with stable coins, how that fits within the financial and the payment system.
Yeah, I think that approach clearly contrasts with what really China has been working on, is essentially managed, basically programmable money by the federal government. And frankly, they're working on it with the Bank of International Settlement, with the European Central Bank, the Bank of England. Mark Carney seems to be a fan of it. And they're all collaborating to basically develop communist money and impose it on their populations. And it seems like you have a different hope for the future. So as you lay that out, would love to work with you on the future of money. I really think it's going to shape the future of Western civilization.
I couldn't agree more with you, Congressman, and it's moving fast, and the U.S. has to keep the lead.
All right, thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Beatty, who is the ranking member of our National Security Subcommittee.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, and to the witness. First, let me start by saying that I am certainly concerned about the direction of this country, this Treasury, this administration, and this president. I believe that our democracy is under attack, as well as CFPB, the Federal Reserve, CDFIs, HUD, and the list goes on and on. So I'd like to start with a question on community development financial institutions, or CDFIs as we refer to them, which you've played a key role in economic development. As a matter of fact, in your one-page testimony, you mention economic development or growth or security almost a dozen times. You also have stated promoting economic growth and economic security is essential to ensuring financial stability. Economic growth strengthens housing, business, financial institutions, so forth and so forth. Nationwide, CDFIs finance more than 45,000 affordable homes. However, applications for CDFIs fund programs have been pending for almost 12 months or more, and except for some CDFI funds for administrative costs, none of the FY25 program funds have been allocated. Last fall, CDF funds issued a supplemental application to CDFIs to ensure that they were in compliance with the executive orders issued by the administration, but funds still have not been dispersed. Now, my question to you, are there plans in place to release monies to CDFIs so they can continue to finance affordable housing projects? That's a yes or no. If yes, when? If no, why not?
Treasury has been working to implement the CDFI funds programs as required by law. Upon apportionment of appropriated funds, Treasury will be
Is
able
this going to be a yes or no?
outstanding program awards.
Mr. Secretary,
expeditiously
no.
as possible.
I'm going to abide by the chairman's rules, but I have some rules. You can say yes or no, and then if you say yes, you may continue to give that support. If it's a no, then you tell me why not. And now we need to be clear. Yes, let's start with the yes or no. I'm trying to be respectful, but you're not going to do what you want to do on my time. Yes or no, or you can say I'm not going to answer it, and I'll move on.
Number 3.
Okay, so let the record show that he refuses to answer a question. No, we're not going to do that with me. We are not going to do that with me.
Ask it.
It's the gentlewoman's time from Ohio.
Now, you opted for number 3, so you get to hear my wrath that you refuse to answer a question under your authority and what this administration, and yet you've talked about the value of housing, and you're not releasing the funds, and I want the record to be clear on that. So let me move on. Mr. Secretary, I've asked you, as your predecessors, Democrats or Republican, Jack Lew, Mnuchin, Janet Yellen, and you a year ago, about putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. We started this process in 2020. At that time, Jack Lew said it would take 4 years. I sent you a letter. Do you know what your response was to me?
I haven't seen the letter, ma'am.
Well, you answered the letter. So now I was given a chance to help you. You responded to my letter just recently, because you know I drilled you on this. But now you responded to tell me in a few words, it's a complex process. So that's not really an answer. We know it's a complex process. Your Republican predecessor said the same thing, but he went on to support it. So it was supported by 3 people before you. It was scheduled for 2020. Then it got backlogged, because it's a complex process, to 2028. The last Republican said we would be on target to do this. So now my question to you is, why is it not on target? And why are you not engaged in this process? Part 1. Part 2, do you know who is over the Department or the Bureau of Engraving and Printing? Do you know who that person is?
Sorry?
Do you know who is over the Bureau of Engraving and Printing?
I am.
You run it? You run it?
The Treasury Secretary.
Be careful now.
Treasury
Do you run the Bureau?
Gentlelady's time has
Then
expired.
let me ask him to put it in writing, because he doesn't run it. It's appointed by him, and it's Patricia Collins. So let the record show that he was incompetent in answering the question.
Gentlelady's time has
Now I
expired,
do.
and I invite the Secretary to respond to your detailed question that you proposed on the bill in writing. And I now call on the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hill, and thank you, Ranking Member Waters, for holding this important hearing. And thank you, Secretary Bessent, for taking time from your schedule to be with us here today. If you'd like to take a moment to address any of the issues that were just on the table.
There are numerous incidents with counterfeited bills, and we are revamping the 50, which is the most counterfeited bill first. The Congresswoman does not seem to have an interest in safety and security of American money.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Secretary Bessent, I really enjoyed reading your recent Wall Street Journal op-ed with my friend Senator Bill Hagerty about strengthening Main Street banks. You make a compelling case that the current FDIC insurance limits contribute to an uneven playing field, where deposits flow toward the largest institutions in times of stress. Could you elaborate on how raising deposit insurance coverage would help restore confidence in community and mid-sized banks, particularly in places like my home state of Tennessee, and ensure small businesses can keep their payroll and operations anchored in their local banks?
Again, Congressman, what happens during a stress period, the owners of the capital rightly move it to where they believe their deposits are insured. There is the belief that large institutions that have a special exemption called moral hazard. And I think by increasing the deposit accounts, especially for payroll accounts, that those deposits will not be forced to flee. When a local businessman calls up and says, I have $2, $5, $7 million in your bank, I've known you, we banked here for 50 or 100 years, but we're gonna have to move, many times they don't come back.
Thank you. I share that view. Secretary Bessent, do you believe that raising deposit insurance limits would directly translate into more lending capacity for small businesses and farms that rely on community banks, particularly in rural communities like those that I represent across Middle and East Tennessee?
Congressman Rose, in a fractional banking system, deposits finance lending. When deposits flow out, the ability to have capital to lend is greatly diminished.
Thank you. Again, share that view. Mr. Secretary, the FSOC annual report highlights the terrorism risk insurance program and underscores that small insurers are significant participants in the terrorism risk market, with their market share stable since 2017. In light of that, and given that the Terrorism Risk Insurance Act backstop has never been triggered in more than 20 years, do you see any clear evidence today of market failure or a pressing need for federal intervention that would justify continuing a permanent federal backstop at current levels in this market, rather than beginning a responsible transition to a more private terrorism risk insurance system?
Congressman, I have no data, so I have no opinion, but I will get back to you on that.
Thank you. I'd appreciate. And how does Treasury assess, if you could add to this or you can address it now, taxpayer risk under TRIA today? And do you believe that that risk profile is consistent with what Congress originally envisioned as a temporary federal program?
I used to be an insurance analyst, but I haven't seen the actuarial table, so I'm not going to comment.
Thank you. I was proud to vote for President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill and help create Trump accounts, which give kids a real foundation to build savings and wealth from day one. These accounts are a great way to help families in Tennessee and across the country start planning for their children's futures. Can you update us on how implementation of the Trump accounts is going so far, whether Treasury has the resources it needs to stand this program up effectively, and whether credit unions and small community financial institutions will be allowed to participate in offering these accounts?
I'll work backwards. Initially, there will be one master custodian for the accounts. So initially, these small banks will not be able to participate. Eventually, the holders of the accounts will be able to migrate out to designated institutions. The uptake is going quite well. We had a big event this week to roll out the accounts. More than 1 million households representing more than 1 million children have signed up. I would tell everyone to look for the commercial right after the national anthem at the Super Bowl this weekend. I think we are prepared for a flood of signups, and then they will go live on July 5th, and the goal is the lowest possible fees on these index funds.
Thank you, Thank you, Treasury Secretary. Hopefully no singing as a part
Gentleman's
of that.
time has expired.
I yield back.
Gentleman from California, Mr. Vargas, who is the ranking member of our Monetary Policy Task Force, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and ranking member, and to the witness. I have to confess that I'm very disappointed in today. I think a lot of our allies are losing faith in us. We hear it in our European allies, certainly. We see it in the diminishment of our dollar. But we always seem to have faith in sort of the Fed chairman and also the Treasury Secretary. They're always very serious people. They're always seen around the world as very serious people. I've been here for a long time now. I used to watch when a friend of mine, Sean Duffy, used to sit over there and scream at the top of his lungs at Jack Lew when he was Treasury Secretary. And the Treasury always answered in the most logical way, never flippant, never libelous. Would never say something like, sure, my colleague here wants to see Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. She didn't say anything about not wanting confidence and not wanting to have secure money. That was a very libelous comment that you made, a very flippant comment. It was very disappointing to hear. And then to hear the libelous comment that you made about the Fed, that we lost faith in the Fed, you said in your testimony here today, because of inflation and the cost overrun in the buildings. You know, mimicking basically the same thing that the president said is about the chairman. You didn't say it in the same words, you said it in a way that's a little more elegant, but means the same thing. Today, you've been very performative in everything that you've done. That's very disappointing. I wanted to ask you about the independence of the Fed. I think it is important. You did comment about that a little bit. But today, I think has been pretty much a waste of time. But sadly, I think it really does erode the faith in our country. When a person as important as you give the answers that you gave today. So I'm not going to ask you any questions because I think it would be useless. But I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, we've had some very good hearings recently. This was not one of them. This is not your finest day, and it's too bad because I think you're a very competent person. I disagree with some of your policies, but you're a very competent person. The president has put in some people in very important places that are sort of caricatures of incompetence. That's not you. Today was not your finest day. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman from California yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, who chairs our House Administration Committee and also chairs the subcommittee here on digital assets, financial technology, and artificial intelligence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service and your leadership at Treasury. There's been a lot of energy in the room today. A handful of times you made some great points, you've been cut off. So I want to go back and give you an opportunity to elaborate on a couple of these points. At the beginning of the hearing today, Ranking Member Waters, you were in the process of mentioning the 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants came into the United States during the Biden administration, functionally with the blessing of Democrats in Congress. As you mentioned that, and you were building into a comment about the impact that that would have on the price of housing in the United States, the ranking member said, "Can you shut up?" end quote. I think you're about to make actually a really good point about the impact that Biden's and the Democrats' open border policies had on the cost of housing. The time is now mine, and I'd actually love you to provide a little additional detail as to where you're headed there.
Good. Well, Congressman, thank you. And to answer Congressman Vargas, who isn't able to stay for the whole or to hear my reply, that as you would have seen, that when approached, I am happy to have a conversation. Representative Green, who is known for some fiery moments, and I had a very respectful back and forth, and I enjoyed my conversation with him, and it is a shame that all conversations cannot be like that. Yes or no answers to me mean that the representative has talking points from his or her staff and is unable to discuss things in a logical and in-depth manner. In terms of your question, look, we have had 4.1% economic growth for the past 3 quarters. We're on track for 3% growth, and the economy is doing very well. The financial stability that we are seeing, whether it is through growth or through economic security, we've been brought back from the edge.
Yeah, President Trump, your leadership at Treasury, we have absolutely been brought back from the edge. In particular, as we think about the impact of housing, was Biden's open border policies directly related to some of the inflation that we've seen in housing? That's where you're previously cut off.
Yes, to come back to that, I would point to a study from the Wharton School that said that supply and demand works, especially in low-end housing, that letting in 10, 20, we don't know how many illegal aliens that flooded into the housing market, they all need someplace to live. So what we have seen is that the Wharton study says that for every 1% increase due to the illegal immigration, rents went up 1%. So if you got a 20% increase in population, then rents went up 20%.
Kind of economics 101, supply and demand, and Democrats drove up demand by having a massive number of illegal immigrants coming into the United States.
The Democrats didn't care what they did to working Americans. We're seeing a substantial drop in rents.
Let me build another point you were making when you were cut off. You said that lumber's at a 5-year low. Ranking Member Waters then said, quote, "You don't get to talk," end quote. Again, the time is mine. You get to talk. Lumber's at a 5-year low. Supply and demand's in effect. What's the impact of that on the cost of housing?
That facts can be annoying for people who just want to make talking points. And the fact is, we have not seen an increase in housing costs. The increase in housing costs came during the Great Inflation, up 21.5% for consumer prices for the CPI, up much more, up in the 30s for working Americans. So that's the cost to housing and regulation.
We're still recovering from the Democrats' terrible policies. Let me get one final point in. I chair the Digital Assets Subcommittee. We passed and was signed into law the Stable Act, setting forward legislation as relates to stablecoin. Treasury is required to complete implementing regulations by July 18 of this year. Are you going to hit the deadline, and are there any impediments preventing you from hitting that July 18 deadline?
I don't see any impediments at present, and if we're going to hit them, we will notify you in the committee.
I appreciate that. Appreciate your service at Treasury. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman yields back. I recognize the gentleman from Illinois. Mr. Gaston, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for being here today, Mr. Bessent. Appreciate your patience with us. Since the U.S. captured President Maduro, the Trump administration has been selling Venezuelan oil. Secretary Wright has said that's going to continue indefinitely. The president's January 9th executive order said that those funds are the sovereign property of Venezuela, but has directed you, the Treasury Secretary, to hold those assets in custody to facilitate disbursements transfers as directed by the Secretary of State. As I've gone through the 91 specific trusts that you have the statutory authority to oversee, none of those have any relationship to Venezuelan oil. So can you help us understand under what statutory authority, or what statutory authority is Treasury relying on to exercise the discretionary control over natural resources and sovereign assets of another country?
Treasury has no control over the...
I'm just asking about what statutory authority you rely on.
Again, we are operating under an agreement between state and energy that we are not involved.
No, but the executive order said that the Treasury Secretary is holding those assets in custody. That's a specific language there, and is facilitating disbursements. Under what authority are you acting?
I will get back to you with the exact authority, but it is under agreement with state
Let me just clarify, because my concern is that the executive order cites IEPA. IEPA specifically says that you have to be engaged in hostilities with a country for IEPA to trigger that claim. Secretary Rubio said that we are not at war with Venezuela. I would agree. I'm glad we're not at war. So unless you disagree with Secretary Rubio, I'm unclear under what legal authority the United States has to control or disperse those assets.
Well, I would believe that the IEPA authority would act for a period of time for a
Not unless we're not. That's not
a transition.
Well, look, that's not true. But please provide in writing what you're doing there, because I want to get to why I think that's material. Last week, Secretary Rubio also said that the $200 million in proceeds was sitting in a Qatari bank that was owned by Venezuela. He went on to say the Treasury has a written agreement with Venezuela's interim government to review the monthly budget request for payments from that account. I come back to where the authority comes. What statutory authority are you using to exercise custody indirectly through a third country and direct the release of funds from those offshore accounts?
The IEPA.
That's not in IEPA. You're managing, okay, so if you're managing a third country, not in IEPA, and please do provide us with the legal guidance, because this matters. What controls are you putting to audit those flows? Because as you know, the Venezuelan government still has a lot of shady people. How are you controlling the dispersion of those flows so that they don't go back to some of the shady characters that the president is concerned about in Venezuela? What is the audit process?
Again, we will be bringing in outside auditors for this, and the Venezuelan government will be producing.
Do you have an agreement in place right now for those auditors?
Sorry?
Do you have an agreement for that audit in place right now?
Not at present.
Okay, because Secretary Rubio, when he was asked that question before the Senate, he said that the Treasury had handled the agreement that he would be providing to the Senate committee. Are you saying that Secretary Rubio was incorrect, or that you're not aware of the agreement that Treasury directed according to Secretary
I'm saying I'm not aware of the agreement.
Okay, so Secretary Rubio said he would provide that to the Senate committee. Can you please coordinate with Secretary Rubio and give us your word to provide us what Secretary Rubio is providing? Because he is alleging that was done under your
With
oversight.
pleasure, Congressman. And
Okay.
just so you know, the goal here, it's been 30 days.
I want to just move fraudulent conveyance. I have a specific concern that we've entered into contracts with companies like Vitol, who have pled guilty to bribery and all sorts of nefarious actors. If I was a company buying stolen goods and we didn't have statutory authority, I'm going to have a lot of creditors coming after me. One last thing, sir. I want to read you a quote. Trump will pursue a weak dollar policy rather than implementing tariffs. Tariffs are inflationary and would strengthen the dollar. Do you recognize that quote?
I believe you're referring to a letter that I wrote, and
Yes.
tariffs could be inflationary.
No, it says tariffs are inflationary.
Yep. You know what?
You had said to the chairwoman, I'd like to introduce into the record a January 31, 2024 letter from, quote, Scott Bessent and the Key Square team to your partners, where that quote comes from.
Without objection.
Do you want to correct what you said to the ranking member when you specifically said that you did not say tariffs are inflationary?
Well, I think she referenced a letter in the summer of something, not that particular.
No, I think you disparaged the New York Times.
Sorry?
You said tariffs are inflationary.
Sorry?
You said tariffs are inflationary.
Tariffs-
Do you want to correct what you said to the ranking member, or did you lie?
If I was mistaken, I want to correct it. And I was also mistaken when I said that tariffs could be inflationary, because they
Gentleman's
haven't been.
time has expired.
We've seen inflation drop to 2.1%.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina. Mr. Timmons, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Secretary, it is great to see you again, and thank you for being here. Your experience and leadership at Treasury are widely respected and appreciated as we work to make the U.S. economy more competitive in the global economy. And I know you were hearing some questions about tariffs. Is that the purpose of the last year, to renegotiate our trade agreements to make the U.S. economy more competitive in the global economy?
100%. There are numerous goals, but it is to make the U.S. economy more resilient. We're now seeing 4.1% growth for the past 3 quarters. So we are seeing inflation drop. So tariff inflation was the dog that didn't bark.
Well, I appreciate it. I think that the businesses that are trying to compete in the global economy are far better off because of the last year. There was some strain through the uncertainty, but most of that is behind us, and I just really appreciate your hard work. Additionally, after several years of regulatory uncertainty and pervasive government overreach, it is encouraging to see serious leadership at Treasury focused on restoring balance to our financial system. That work matters not only to markets, but to families, small businesses, and communities across the country. You've called for a fundamental reset of financial regulation and emphasized Treasury's role in promoting appropriately tailored regulation to support economic growth. I agree with that approach. While there has been progress on tailoring supervision, far less has been done to modernize regulatory tailoring itself, particularly the interagency thresholds that trigger enhanced prudential standards for Category 2 through 4 banks. Those thresholds were set years ago and have not been updated to reflect inflation, economic growth, or changes in the financial system. As a result, banks that were never intended to be treated like GSIBs are increasingly subject to requirements that do not match their risk profiles. Republicans on this committee raised this concern in a letter to the federal banking agencies last November. Mr. Secretary, my question is this: how are Treasury and the Financial Stability Oversight Council working to coordinate across the agencies to modernize and update these thresholds and to ensure that regulatory tailoring keeps pace with economic reality rather than falling further behind it?
Congressman, I believe there's a chance that the community banker who I referenced with 200 million assets may have actually been from your district. So we are all hands on deck, and we've seen 50% of these institutions disappear, and we are working as quickly as we can. Again, one size fits all for regulation is a disaster, and as potentially the woman, the bank president and owner from your district said, Bank America's regulatory regime is not good for something in the Piedmont and upcountry in South Carolina for a bank with 200 million assets.
I couldn't agree more. Tailoring should apply not only to prudential standards, but also to supervision itself. For example, my bipartisan legislation, the SMART Act, would allow smaller, well-managed, and well-capitalized institutions to combine certain consumer compliance and IT exams, reducing unnecessary burden while preserving strong oversight. Ms. Secretary, how can legislation like the SMART Act and other bipartisan efforts this committee has advanced help build on the principle of tailoring and restore a regulatory framework that truly works for Main Street without compromising safety and soundness?
Congressman, I think it may be very important to get this into a regulatory framework, because what we've seen for too long, just as the bank examiner said to the $200 million banker, you should be more like Bank America. We cannot have supervision, or we cannot have regulation done through supervision. We need to have clear guidelines for tailoring for many banks, as I said earlier, are industry concentrated, geographic concentrated, and we have got to push this through, or we are going to, they will be too small to succeed.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for that. I want to close by discussing the trillions of dollars in foreign direct investment that you and President Trump have shepherded into the United States over the past year. In our home state of South Carolina alone, hundreds of billions of dollars in new investment have been announced that will create high-paying, highly skilled jobs for our communities. Nearly every week I'm in Washington, I meet with a foreign manufacturer that is expanding its footprint in the upstate. And I also want to thank you for your work to remove tariffs from coffee, which has been directly welcomed by manufacturers like Keurig in South Carolina that have benefited from this administration's commitment to fair and sensible trade policy. It's hard to believe that the largest coffee manufacturer in the world is in Spartanburg, South Carolina, but it is, and we greatly appreciate your work to help make sure that they're competitive in the U.S. economy and in the global economy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back. Thank you.
And Congressman, I would just point out that there's a lot of discussion on coffee prices.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Coffee prices experienced a global
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Please, Ms. Secretary, if you'd respond in writing if you have more on that topic. Now, Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Massachusetts. Ms. Presley, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Secretary, it took a year to get Secretary Turner before this committee, so I'm grateful for your return. And I want to pick up where we left off 9 months ago. The average American spends over $20,000 on baby costs in the first year of having a baby. Essential products like car seats are more expensive because of Trump tariffs. You told me last time that they were under consideration, but nothing has changed since May of last year, much to the distress of families. There is still no exemption for tariffs on baby products. For the record, Mr. Secretary, how many tariff exemptions are there?
There are actually very few. now.
You're right. Actually, I think there's some 30 pages of exemptions totaling over 1,000, including for asbestos. Can you explain to families across America, working families struggling to make ends meet, why baby products that are required by law are not exempt from Trump's tariffs?
Again, Congresswoman, it is a matrix, and many of these products, unfortunately, are made in China, and
Mr. Secretary, reclaiming my time.
Everything that goes to
It's an unacceptable answer. You've had 9 months. You told me it was under consideration. You've had 9 months to think about it, and while you've been thinking about it, working families have been struggling. When it is required by law that they have many of these essential baby costs, your report from the Department of Treasury refers to them, car seats, as essential safety tools. So if you can acknowledge that, this is...
Well, I will acknowledge the gas to run the car.
Well, listen,
is at a 5-year low.
You've included asbestos in your exemptions. So you're telling me you can do asbestos and not baby products that are... Excuse me, it's my time.
I think you would want children to be safe in their homes.
Mr. Secretary, parents with newborns don't want to hear your excuses. They need to keep their babies safe. They want to comply with the law, and they need action to lower costs, period. So will you exempt baby products from tariffs, yes or no?
Again, we will
Yes
look
or
into
no?
it.
Mr. Secretary, respectfully.
We will look at.
Mr. Secretary, respectfully.
Congresswoman,
Yes
I do
or
not. I am the
no?
Treasury Secretary. I am not the USTR.
Reclaiming my
I
time.
am not the President of the United States.
Reclaiming my time.
So you're asking the wrong person.
I'll take a commitment. Mr. Secretary, you are taking my time. Reclaiming my time, Mr. Secretary.
This is Financial Stability Oversight Council.
Mr. Secretary, then I ask for your advocacy then. Because a no or a non-answer is unacceptable to the working families you claim to care so much about. Moving on.
I don't know if it's the gentlelady's time.
I'm agreeing with you.
Ms. Secretary, it's the gentlelady's time.
You will have my advocacy.
Okay, thank you. Can you say that again for the record?
Sorry.
Can you say that again for the record? I will have your advocacy?
I am one voice.
For an exemption?
I am one voice.
Okay. Have you been paying attention to the high rate of unemployment for black workers? Are you aware of that? The high unemployment rate for black workers?
It is traditionally higher than for all workers.
Well, listen, it's through the roof right now. There's hundreds of thousands of black workers that have been pushed out of the workforce, and the unemployment rates for black workers and all workers are among the highest they've been since the COVID-19 pandemic. Black workers contribute over $1 trillion to the U.S. economy, but the push out of these workers from the workforce has led to a loss of $37 billion in the GDP, with black women being among, just so y'all know, the most educated and most active in seeking work. Their push out is a glaring warning sign for where our economy is headed, because black workers, black women in particular, have always been the canaries in the coal mine. So this is a problem for everyone. Black women are bearing the brunt, but everyone will feel this hurt. I have led letters to Fed Chair Powell calling for action to be taken. He is also a member of FSOC. So I want to ask you, Mr. Secretary, will you commit to analyzing black unemployment rates specifically and its impacts on financial stability? Yes or no?
I will analyze black unemployment rates.
Wonderful. And when will you get us a report and a plan of action? I was thinking March 6th.
I can't commit to a date.
Okay. All right. Well, I think March 6th makes sense. I'd give you over a month, which is more than enough time to convene that working group and to report out your findings. I know you already have the infrastructure to do that. So at the end of the day, black families, black futures, and the lives and livelihoods of all who call this country home are depending on you to act. And with that, happy Black History Month. I yield back.
And thank you. And I was sorry to see you not run for Senate.
Gentlewoman yields back. Chair recognizes the chair of the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, Mr. Muser from Pennsylvania.
Secretary Bessent, thank you very much for being with us, and thank you when you state that it's now Main Street's turn. I can assure you the people of Pennsylvania's 9th Congressional District greatly appreciate that, and your remarks are quite refreshing. The previous Treasury Secretary, once when I asked what their economic growth initiatives were, they implied that federal spending was their primary, if not only, growth initiative. So clearly, under your leadership and President Trump's and the Republicans in Congress, passing the family's tax cut delivered meaningful tax relief billions to workers and small business owners, no tax on tips, regulatory reform, no tax on overtime, 100% depreciation. All this is driving our savings. All this is driving our economy for a booming GDP Q3 and Q4 in the over 4% range. So things are going very well. We expect 2026 to be pretty exciting as well. Secretary, if there is anything that was asked that is still on your mind that you would like to respond to, why don't you go ahead and do so?
Again, this is supposed to be a financial stability oversight mission, and that we have taken this very seriously, and we believe that a lack of growth, one of the reasons I am sitting here and came out from behind my very quiet and nice private life is because I was worried that the U.S. was going to become like a European-style social democracy. And indeed, what we are seeing in Europe, in many countries, is the death spiral of higher debt, raised taxes, lower growth. The U.S. will have reported likely, despite the government shutdown, despite the longest government shutdown in history, 4.1% growth for the past 3 quarters. And so we have been successful at that. Europe last week celebrated 0.3% growth. So it's no comparison. Right. And I think we are beginning to accelerate. And importantly, everything we are doing is to fix this terrible Biden inflation from the past 4 years, 21.5%, much more for working families, and we are bringing that down.
Your remarks and the president's remarks in Davos suggested that how you spiraled down in your economy, which Europe has been doing, not having closed borders or secure borders anyway, over-reliance upon imports and driving the public sector rather than the private sector is a recipe for disaster. And so we appreciate you correcting the ship and moving the United States in the right direction. Just to get to some questions, Secretary. You've emphasized putting Main Street ahead of Wall Street when evaluating bank capital standards. How will modernizing the capital framework improve credit access and affordability for small businesses, homeowners, farmers, who ultimately, in the end, bear the costs for such excessive capital requirements?
Again, Congressman, the groups you just listed are the 3 most dependent on community and small banks. And we are determined to increase their lending capacity, to increase their proclivity to lend. And we want to do it on a safe, sound, and smart basis.
In the previous administration, we had regulators that imposed capital requirements well beyond the international peers, including the GSIB surcharge, the CCAR, Tier 1 leverage ratios. Are these frameworks being reviewed holistically to better support lending and economic growth?
Again, we are not going to let outside regulators determine what is best for the U.S. financial system.
Thank you.
The strength of the U.S. financial system is the depth and breadth, and we do not want to end up like Canada with 5 banks, Switzerland with 1, France with 3.
Absolutely, great. Your decisive action to confront what should concern all of us, certainly concerns us, is the rampant government benefits fraud uncovered in Minnesota. Can you walk us through how Treasury is using your authorities to identify, disrupt, and recover fraud proceeds, and how Minnesota is serving as a start for a broader national enforcement model?
Indeed, there is a substantial amount of waste, fraud, and abuse, and Americans and legislators on both sides of the aisle should be outraged when you are there and you see empty daycare centers, senior centers, and I personally met with 2 centers for autistic children, and they are not getting their benefits. So we are using our regulations under FinCEN to follow the money, which is what we've done, whether it's Mexican drug cartels, whether it's the mafia, or whether
time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you,
Gentleman
Senator,
yields.
very, very much for your great work.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey. Scott Heimer, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. The 10-year Treasury is running around mid-4% range. Mortgage rates are still above 6%. That's keeping monthly payments high and pricing would-be buyers out of the market. The affordability crisis is increasing the homeownership gap in North Jersey, which I represent, and across the country. How can we get the 10-year down and help make homeownership more affordable? And that's what I'm really focused on.
Well, the 10-year bond had its best year since 2020 last year, and we actually had a fiscal contraction in the budget. The rest of the G7 bond market went up in yield. So if we continue to...
So you see a path where this, you think we'll continue to see it tick down, especially the long
Well,
run?
I think we can do that, and that I believe that we have Oliver Wyman's numbers, not Treasury's. They say that what has been done with financial deregulation unleashes $2.5 trillion of lending capacity into the U.S. economy. So by creating more capacity, there is less of a competition for scarce funds. So we are decreasing scarcity.
Thank you. I have a strong belief that AI will revolutionize financial services and delivering meaningful gains for customers and regulators and institutions if we do it right. FSOC's report strikes an encouraging balance, highlighting AI's potential to improve resilience and efficiency in financial markets while also noting that vendor concentration can create challenges. How is FSOC threading the needle to enable broad AI adoption while encouraging competition? And where can Congress help get this right so AI can flourish as a helpful tool for Americans in the financial markets?
Good. I think it's important to work together because what we see many times in these very quick technology cycles is the technology gets ahead of the regulation. So working together to keep the regulation in sync with the technology, whether it's for the financial system or for anywhere else. There's good news, as you said, it will change the interaction. The bad news is that it gives, whether it's state actors or independent actors, more tools.
What are you doing internally at Treasury? Obviously, you spend a lot of time on the security side on the Treasury piece of it. What are we doing about that?
Yes, so we have both at Treasury and then bringing in our private sector partners regularly. We do tabletop exercises in terms of what would happen if a malign actor got into the system. How can we reinforce that? As you may have read, before I arrived, Treasury itself was hacked.
Yeah, I saw that.
By, we believe, a state actor. So again, increasing resilience, being aware, and working with our private sector partners for best practices.
Thank you. We're obviously seeing a combination of factors that historically make markets nervous, softer dollar with higher gold prices. Even if there are multiple drivers, those moves are often interpreted as investors seeking protection against policy uncertainty or concerns about U.S. fiscal and monetary credibility. They can also be early signals that global capital is demanding a higher confidence premium to hold U.S. assets. Are markets starting to price in a sustained shift away from U.S. assets, do you believe? And what are the specific indicators you watch to see if we're seeing that pullback from foreign investors?
Yep, so what we see at Treasury is we saw record amount of foreign inflows. Despite the popular narrative, we saw a record amount of foreign inflows into Treasury auctions last year. This year, many of the auctions have traded through the prevailing price before the auction. So we are still seeing very good flow, and we are still seeing massive flows into U.S. equities. And as several of the congressmen said, we are seeing very substantial foreign direct investment.
One of the things I'm concerned about, this week Reuters reported Disney saw fewer international visitors at its U.S. parks. U.S. overall saw 6% fewer visitors despite global tourism revenue rising 6.5%. Canadian trips are down significantly, 22% year over year. Even at the Great Jersey Shore, 2025 beach tag revenue was down. What is the administration's plan to calm volatility? And obviously tariff policy has been part of this, so tourists can continue to choose the U.S.
Look, on some things, there's nothing we can do. If the Premier of British Columbia or Ontario wants to be especially hostile and tell people not to come to the U.S., that's a decision. I would say it's their loss. And as you said...
do you think we'll see less volatility with the tariff policy kind of firming up, or...?
Less volatility in tourism?
Well, yeah, because it affects everything. People don't want to come here.
Time has expired.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Indiana. Mr. Stutzman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I'm going to yield to the chairman just briefly for a couple of questions he has.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate members on the Republican side allowing you to clarify points on some key discussions back and forth, and we have had some good ones today. There was an exchange you had with my friend from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, about artificial intelligence. And in your capacity as chair of FSOC, our view here is that artificial intelligence offers great promise for better consumer service, fighting fraud, more accuracy in providing customer service, but also in providing a more robust compliance process with the rules in banking and the brokerage and securities industry. I wonder if you could talk from an FSOC point of view about a philosophy of overseeing artificial intelligence both in the financial services industry and among the supervisors of the financial services industry.
Yes. So, again, we are working with our private sector partners to best practices. And, Chairman, as you said, there are two pieces to this. There is service improvement, which we're, for instance, working on at the IRS. We hope to be able to use artificial intelligence there to get customer wait downs and service down. On the other side, both financial security, alerting everyone to the risk of what is going on, but this is a transformative change, and as I mentioned to the Congressman, we look forward to working with you on legislation to make sure that the technology does not move too far ahead of the legislation.
Very helpful, and I yield back to my friend from Indiana.
All right, thank you. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for being just a steady voice. Our economy is seeing tremendous growth. Is there volatility in places? Absolutely. We're still recovering. You know, we've heard a lot today from my colleagues across the aisle about tariffs and the effect on inflation in the U.S. economy. I just want to remind everybody, during the Biden administration, grocery prices increased by over 23%. I'm in the food industry. We've seen it. That growth has accounted for nearly 91% of grocery price increases since January of 2021. In Biden's first year alone, grocery prices increased by 6.5% as compared to 1.9% during President Trump's first year in office. And that's nearly 3.5 times faster, but yet my colleagues want to blame Trump's tariffs for the prior administration's uncontrolled and excessive spending. And I know that, you know, what the administration, what the Trump administration and you are doing is really, I mean, the America First policies are spot on. We've needed somebody in the White House to be fighting for America First. And so I just want to say thank you from folks in Northeast Indiana for your hard work to reset the table globally. And, you know, we're a manufacturing, agricultural sector. We grow the food for the country. We manufacture, you know, medical devices and all these other things. And so I just want to say thanks for that.
Well, good. And Congressman, just to tell you, I was with the president out in Iowa, and to combine two of your themes, manufacturing and the farm economy, we were with the CEO of John Deere, and he is building a new factory in Indiana, and he's building one in Indiana, one in North Carolina, and the president said, "What made you do that?" And he said, "The tariffs."
The tariff.
Tariffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, this really is putting manufacturing in a position to compete with China, whether it's a CNC shop, whether it's the, you know, the medical device industry. There's obviously some pieces there with regulatory environment, things like that, but it's really giving manufacturing a spot. One thing I would ask, and if I could maybe share with your office, I had a foundry owner in the office yesterday, and there are some definitions around foundries. And so I'd be happy to send that information over to your office to take a look at. It's a industry that's, of course, very important for America, and I know you all care very much about manufacturing and the steel industry, so I'll send that over.
Good, with pleasure.
Yeah, but anyway, my time's about to expire, but I do want to just say thanks, because it's, you know, what people back home are really dealing with is this cost over the last 5 years. And for you to really reset the table, they believe in America. We just need to show them that we believe in America as well, and that America can be great.
Good. Well, Congressman, there's a level and there's a rate of change. The level is very difficult to get down. We're trying as hard as we can, but we've slowed the rate of change greatly.
Yeah, thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, a bank's leverage ratio is important, right?
Well, there are numerous leverage ratios. Congressman, which one are you referring to?
So for the record, if I may, Mr. Chair, I'm going to submit the bank capital's analysis semi-annual update for the record. May I?
Without objection, so ordered.
I want to talk about the way that we look at global systematic important banks, what do you guys call it, G-SIBs, is that right?
That's correct.
That's what I'm talking about. They're banking organizations that could trigger a financial crisis if they failed, correct?
And they could trigger a financial crisis by not lending.
Yeah, so the leverage ratio is important when we look at it, right?
Again, I'm not sure which leverage ratio.
Okay, so I'm
you're
looking at
referring to.
here, this chart, okay? It says Tier 1 capital. Does that help?
Tier 1, that's helpful.
Okay, so I know it's kind of hard to see, but the green line is the community banks. You see how high that cushion is? That it's about what, almost 11%? I know you can't see it. It's fine. I was going to enlarge
As an
it
act of
for
good
you.
faith, I'll take your word.
Yeah, so the largest bank capital analysis for the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, it shows that last June, the Tier 1 leverage ratio of community banks was at 10.83%. For the banks that pose the largest threat to global system, what they call G-SIBs, this is the big banks, the ones who take all the risks. You know this, right? Their supplementary leverage ratio was about 5.8%. It's a huge difference, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm getting there, I promise. Do you think the largest, most complex banks are roughly half are as risky in the threat that they pose to the financial system as a community bank in my district?
Well, I think, Congresswoman, that what you're neglecting to think about is the composition of the assets and the capital. So the capital at the G-SIBs can be much more liquid, where the banks in your community are much more, as we're used to seeing in the movies.
Well, let me explain to the public why community. Yeah, I understand. Community banks, though, lend out equivalent about 75% of their deposits to real economy. Some people refer to it as Main Street, but we call it the real economy, people, families, communities. The largest banks only lend about 40% of their deposits into our real economy. Instead, they rapidly expand their loans to hedge funds and private equity that you're calling liquidity, they can liquidate, right? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm also
I'm
saying they hold a much higher,
yeah, but the big banks are the ones who keep failing, right?
What's that?
The big banks are the ones who keep failing.
No, many small banks
Well,
fail
that's
too.
because they're getting pushed out. We're not actually supporting community banks.
Well, I've said, I think more than 100 times today, that I support community banks, and what
I
I don't want
understand.
to see
You could
is...
say it, but you got to do something about it. But listen, so Trump's
I've met with more than 200
I know,
community
Mr.
bankers.
Secretary, but this is pretty bad.
So
Because the fact that community banks in my business have almost twice as much capital percentage-wise compared to banks that pose the largest threat to our financial system, you know, that shows that just how much playing field's tilted towards Wall Street. You understand that, right? That's where the risk is. The big banks do far less for our real economy, for everyday people, and that's what I'm trying to say, because Trump's regulators recently, you know, finalized a rule to modify the supplementary leverage ratio that applied to the largest banks. Many former regulators and experts have warned that such step will actually undermine the safety and soundness of our largest banks. The final rule will result in a reduction of about $219 billion, about 28%, in capital at the bank subsidiaries of global systematic important banks, G-SIBs. My residents don't know this, but the thing is they end up with having to pay the cost when they fail. And so I'm just trying to stress to my colleagues how important it is, because Secretary, last November, didn't regulators reduce it, again, the capital requirement, right? Yes or no? They
again,
did.
Congresswoman, that I want to be polite, not say it's naive,
Yeah.
what the road you're going down, but much of the excess capital has been invested in the U.S. Treasury market, and keeping those yields low helps the borrowers who want a mortgage or a small business or an ag loan.
But are you paying attention how much they are lending versus community banks?
Yes, we pay very close
really
attention.
low.
I've been a financial
But isn't it
analyst
low?
for over 40
Do
years.
you agree it's low?
Sorry?
It's
No,
still very low.
It's not relative to the historical level.
Mr. Secretary, if you came to my district, you can go to Detroit or the suburbs, they will tell you the big banks do not loan to them. And if they do, it's predatory, it's not supportive. It's the local community banks that support them in owning home ownership and small
The
businesses.
gentlelady's time's expired.
Congresswoman, you and I are in complete
The
agreement.
gentlelady's time's expired. The
Except
gentleman
on-
from
except on the
California,
capital
Ms. Kim,
ratios.
is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Secretary Bessent, it's really great to see you before our committee again. I want to thank you so much for working very closely with me on delivering the historic SALT relief to the tune of $40,000, because with that, my constituents in Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties will finally be able to see the relief as they file their tax returns. The 4 times increase in the SALT deduction, coupled with other provisions of the Working Families Tax Cuts Act, will result in supercharged tax returns, helping more American families get back on their feet after the years of failed Bidenomics. Last year, you noted that Treasury would revisit the 2023 guidance and analytic framework. And you also highlighted that FSOC has other tools, such as issuing recommendations to member agencies that are more tailored and precise than designation power. So, Secretary Bessent, can we expect a new proposal for non-bank guidance that will be released sometime 2026?
We should expect that.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing that proposal when it's finally released, and hope there will be a public comment period to ensure stakeholders can weigh in and help shape that guidance.
Good. And the Congresswoman, the other thing that I would point out is we had a lot of talk about affordability today, and you were a great advocate for the One Big Beautiful Bill. And what we were seeing, unfortunately, in states like yours, that the state revenue authorities are not going to mirror the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans, so, which is very unfortunate. To the extent that anyone in the California delegation, whether Democrat, Republican, the New York delegation, should push their states to follow through for working Americans.
You can count on me on that. Let me shift gears now. I want to focus on the Community Development Financial Institution Fund. I was really happy and relieved to see that staff at the fund were restored after the conclusion of the Schumer shutdown late last year. I know that you share my view that the fund's work is critical to serving communities that typically do not receive the traditional banking services. So can I ask you how you are planning to make the fund more effective and efficient as we move forward?
Well, what we want to do is focus on community revitalization, not unrelated and ill-advised social policies. And we want to drive reforms, new restrictions on the use of funds, and we want to focus on the program's statutory intent.
I know
Making the lives better for people in their communities.
Sure. CDFI fund, as you know, has bipartisan support, and I think it would also has a bicameral support. So I look forward to continuing to work with you on the future of this critical program. But I also want to talk to you and thank you for being willing to come to California and investigate all the fraud, waste, and abuse. Unfortunately, Gavin Newsom has he tried to hide all those, fraud and waste under the carpet, allowing more than $32 million of unemployment fraud that went unchecked. The state has also watched $13 million stolen from California students because of the AI-generated ghost students enrolled in community colleges. I suspect this is just the tip of the iceberg in California's fraud, waste, and abuse. And I've been talking a lot about this. Unfortunately, sadly, the state that I love and I live and I represent a district from California, it's become a fraud capital of the world. So sad. But that's why we need your team in California. And is there anything that you can share to that end, how your investigation into California fraud is proceeding?
There's nothing I can share right now, but I have spoken to Dr. Mehmet Oz at HHS, and he is laser focused on the healthcare fraud that's going on in California, which seems to be substantial.
Yes, I also sent a letter to Gavin Newsom to that end, and I was glad to see Dr. Oz sending a letter demanding. So now state of California is now in the process of returning $1.6 billion to the federal government. So thank you for that, and I look forward to continue to work with you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Torres, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, does the President have the constitutional authority to remove the Chair of the Federal Reserve or a member of the Board of Governors solely because of a policy disagreement?
I'm not a lawyer, and I don't have an opinion.
You have no opinion on whether the President can remove a board member at will?
Well, I believe if the board member has committed...
No, just in general. I'm not asking about a particular case. I'm asking...
Or malfeasance.
I'm asking about the President's general authority. Let me ask it differently. Do you believe that the unitary executive theory applies to the Federal Reserve?
Again, I think we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court says.
Well, what is your opinion?
I'm not a lawyer.
What is the administration's opinion?
There are varying opinions in the administration.
What's the prevailing opinion? The official opinion?
Again, we'll have to see.
Do you consider the Federal Reserve an executive agency or a legislative agency?
I consider it an independent agency.
So neither executive nor legislative?
So we'll see.
Therefore, independent of presidential control. So it sounds like you do have an opinion.
Again, we will see. We will see, Congressman.
Okay, thank you for establishing the independence of the Federal Reserve.
I do believe that the Federal Reserve has to maintain credibility and be like Caesar's wife, beyond reproach.
And undermining the independence of the Federal Reserve is a threat to that credibility. So I know you're no fan of the New York Times, but let me proceed. Let me reclaim my time. The Wall Street Journal, which is hardly a leftist publication, published an article with the following headline, quote, "Trump claims factory construction is up, contradicting U.S. data." The article then goes on to note, quote, "President Trump claimed that the U.S. factory construction is up by 41%, a number that doesn't appear to be supported by the government's own data." One of the stated policy objectives of the Trump tariffs is to bring back manufacturing jobs. Yet since the so-called Liberation Day tariffs of April 2025, we've seen the net loss of manufacturing jobs. Do you know how many net manufacturing jobs have been lost since April 2025 under your watch?
Well, a couple of things. Manufacturing operates with very long leads.
What's the number? Is there a number?
I believe it's about 67,000.
70,000.
Yes.
70,000 jobs lost.
So, but again,
despite the stated objectives. Let me proceed. Let me proceed. I'm going to reclaim my time.
Flip a switch.
I'm going to reclaim my time. Let me reclaim my time. The Purchasing Managers Index measures whether manufacturing is expanding or contracting. A PMI above 50 means expansion. Below 50 means contraction. Since the so-called Liberation Day tariffs of April 2025, has the PMI been mostly above 50 or below 50?
We just had the biggest increase in over a decade, and we are well above 50 now.
Has it been mostly above 50 since April 2025?
Again, long and variable lead times in manufacturing that you may represent.
Let me ask it differently.
Financial center, not a manufacturing.
Since April 2025, for how many months has the PMI been below 50?
Where are we now? Where are we now?
I'll give you January went up. But what about April to December? It was below 50 for 9 consecutive months.
Where are we now?
So the score is 9-1. 9 months of manufacturing contraction versus 1 month of expansion.
I look forward to seeing you next year.
So one of the stated policy objectives.
And we'll keep score.
Yeah,
okay?
one of the stated policy objectives of the Trump tariffs is to bring back domestic production. Does the Trump administration regret imposing tariffs on goods that cannot be produced domestically at scale in the United States? Do you realize in hindsight that that was foolish?
Do you realize that we use the leverage to bring down tariffs from other countries to take down non-tariff barriers?
Tariffs on bananas gave you leverage?
So Yes, with Colombia, with Brazil. I think, Congressman, you're being very naive with negotiating
I mean,
strategy.
we were promised reindustrialization. A tariff on bananas did not lead to domestic banana production. It simply made bananas more expensive for American businesses and consumers. The same is true of coffee.
Countries negotiating in a more fulsome manner.
Are you willing to commit to no longer imposing tariffs on any product that has neither a domestic substitute nor a national security rationale?
That would be the definition of foolish in a negotiation.
So you're not willing, you're willing to impose tariffs that make more expensive goods that we cannot domestically produce here in the United States.
Again,
and that have no national, what is the national security nexus of bananas and coffee?
Again, why would you do that? That there are numerous things when you negotiate with Indonesia. There are things that are only made in Indonesia, but the Indonesians brought down their tariff barriers or non-tariff barriers.
I get it. We have to make bananas great again. I get it. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yep.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Garbarino, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. First off, let me lead off. I was one of the people you were in negotiations with over SALT last year, and I really appreciate the hard work and the commitment and helping us get it across the finish line. And a lot of my constituents are going to see a big benefit.
Congressman, I can tell you, as also the IRS chairman, that the second largest refunds are going to come from your constituents or go to your constituents because of the SALT deduction.
It's going to be great, and hopefully, like myself, the rest of my constituents, I think, are going to plow that money back into the economy with some purchases when they get their refund this year. So thank you for all the hard work you did there with us. Last year, you oversaw Treasury's efforts to implement President Trump's executive order to phase out paper checks, eliminating a costly, inefficient, and more fraud-prone process. Part of the EO directed the Treasury Department to work with financial institutions, consumer groups, and other stakeholders to address financial access for unbanked and underbanked populations. Secretary, can you share more on on the work stream and particularly how Treasury plans to incorporate digital technologies or payment solutions to increase financial access for unbanked Americans?
Again, we are trying to bring them into the financial system, and we are trying to, one of the ways is over these individuals' phones. And what we see, especially for the cohort you described, is they are especially susceptible to theft of the paper checks. They may not have fixed addresses. The fixed addresses or the mailboxes may not be secure. Someone from the New York delegation in Staten Island brought this to my attention for her district.
And I appreciate that. And I really do think the administration has made serious strides to modernize our financial system through these initiatives. Are there other ways Treasury is looking to safeguard against fraud and improper transactions that you're working on?
Well, again, as we've done in Minnesota, we found a substantial amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. And we want to know, with our geographic targeting order, we have pushed down the threshold for reporting for money service businesses, which these are non-banks, to $300. And we want to know if you are wiring money out of the country, that are you on public benefits? Because one of two things must be true. You're receiving more public benefits than you need, so you can wire it back home, or you have stolen money.
Is there anything that Treasury is working on to, any other payment modernizations that you are all working on right now?
We're constantly working on payment modernizations. We're working with the Fed to modernize their Fed now. We are looking at ways on digital assets also.
Great. I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Myself, just as any other member, has constituents that will face emergencies. You can't plan for those. Whether it's a natural disaster, medical emergency, unexpected, your refrigerator stops working at home. So that they have to, and a lot of people don't have savings accounts, so they often have to rely on short-term credit to cover basic expenses that arise from these emergencies. Would you agree, Secretary, that access to credit can be a critical lifeline for millions of Americans, particularly middle and lower income households?
Yes.
What actions is the administration taking to promote affordable and responsible access to credit for American households?
Again, we believe by some of the financial deregulation that we have done, especially for community banks. This will lead to more credit for communities rather than the money coming from a distant credit card agency.
I appreciate that answer, Mr. Secretary. And last, as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, cybersecurity is one of my top priorities. Secretary, can you describe what the administration is doing to strengthen cybersecurity across the federal financial regulatory agencies, particularly in light of last year's breaches at OCC and CFPB that had information leak?
So the Treasury, we're committed to making risk-informed resources. We constantly work on emerging threats, and we are in close collaboration with our financial sector partners, both as a push and a pull. We recently had a group of them into Treasury for a very large conference on best practices, sharing with each other, sharing with us, and we've used that as a convener, and then our convening ability, and then also
Gentleman's time has expired.
We've identified it as a financial stability concern.
I appreciate my time has expired. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, earlier in response to someone else's question, you talked a little bit there toward the end, but I'm not sure that there was a time for follow-up about, I think you said 10 to 20 million immigrants that are responsible for the driving up the housing costs. Is that what you said?
I'm referring to a Wharton report, yes.
Do you know what they based it on, what data, what information they looked at?
Yes, the survey by survey, community by community. You could go, if you'd like, we'll have my people post it on the Treasury X account as we speak.
Well, thanks for the cooperation, because I'm just completely baffled. The average new home sale is about $500,000, and you're saying that it's driving up the housing crisis when DHS is over there trying to pick up and deport people because, quote unquote, they're a drain on society, they're dependent on public benefits. So if you're on public benefits, how do you afford a $500,000 house?
Well, let me clarify your confusion, because
I'm not confused, sir. Don't be demeaning to me, all right? Because I'm going to object and ask the chairman to make you answer questions.
Anyway, I'm trying to explain to you that it is rental income and rental properties.
So do you really think that people have you been to the rental places of immigrants? I have people in my district that are in rental houses that I wouldn't rent to anybody. They're not expensive. They're probably $500 or $600 a month. You think people that can barely afford housing like that's the housing that we're talking about when we talk about the housing crisis?
D properties push up the price of C properties. Inflation in C properties pushes up the price of A properties. Inflation in the price of A property, B properties pushes up A properties. So it moves up the stack. And if you think that somehow the laws of supply and demand do not apply to housing, I would say you're incorrect.
No, well, I'm not incorrect because, the only thing that we might say about immigrants is that we don't have new housing because they can't, there's a shortage of labor supply because they build the houses, and you all are more focused on deporting them than having them stay here and build. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to introduce three items to the record. Construction workforce shortages are leading cause of project delays as immigrant enforcement affects nearly 1/3 of firms. Second, how the ICE crackdown has impacted Minnesota's economy. And third, the price of cruelty, how Trump's mass deportation agenda endangers all.
Without objection, they'll be put in the record.
Thank you. Do you have any idea how much we're spending on ICE every single day for enforcement?
Again, dear Representative, this is the Financial Stability Oversight Commission.
But you're the treasurer. You're the treasurer. You're supposed to follow the money. In response to questions on this side, you're always talking about, well, we follow the money. Well, have you followed the money? How much are they spending every single day in Minnesota and other states where they occupy cities, terrorize communities, and try to break up our country?
Again, President Trump has secured the border. He was elected on a mandate.
Well, I disagree with you, and I think you're confused. I think you're confused, but let me ask you about something else.
Okay.
Maybe you'll answer this one. You also recently announced the formation of new FSOC Household Resilience Working Group that will focus on American households' financial condition. American households across the country, especially in my district, which is a working class district, Texas 29, have experienced firsthand the destabilizing effects of climate disasters. Property insurance or insurance companies are leaving Texas, California, Florida, and many other states because of growing climate risks. I myself have felt the impact. My constituents feel, Mr. Secretary, what, if anything, are y'all doing to address the risk to households of mortgages and other forms of credit becoming unavailable in certain regions of the country due to climate change?
Again, Congresswoman, are you familiar with KLW 24?
No.
It was the base for everything that was done with climate and with all the proposed climate legislation, and it has been discredited. So everything that FSOC previously did based on climate
Who discredited
has been discredited.
Who discredited it? Nature Magazine has retracted the economic commitment of climate change more than 18 months after first learning that the paper was fatally flawed, with authors acknowledging that its errors are too substantial for a correction. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Nature Magazine. We're relying on Nature Magazine to determine public policy?
Unfortunately, that's what
Gentlewoman's time has expired,
and
and I invite the Secretary to respond
Yes,
more.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a response in writing. Thank you.
Yes, Gentlewoman, we'll have those answers to you in writing. The gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Fitzgerald, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for being here today. Appreciate all the work that you've done, and certainly look forward to working with you in the future. I did have just a couple questions, though. In many ways, the CSEs are far less risky than they were before the financial crisis. And one of the reasons has been that the CSEs, that credit risk transfer, the CRT piece, those programs. However, some industry experts are concerned that the CRT program have been significantly diminished and focus on capital arbitrage instead of the real risk reduction. Can you just kind of in general discuss the importance of the CRT with regard to the CSE in ensuring that they're transferring a significant amount of credit risk to the private market, and really are then avoiding the risk that the taxpayers take on?
Good. So the CRT, or the credit risk transfer, is very important at FSOC and the attendant agencies, the members. We closely monitor to make sure that there is no daisy chain effect, that the quality of the risk transfer is at least as high as the entity from which it was bought. What we saw in the GFC was a complexity can create a daisy chain. So what we want is transparency. But I think CRTs are very important, but they cannot be opaque.
Very good. You called for, you originally called for kind of a fundamental reset of financial regulation, and then you emphasized kind of Treasury's active role in promoting just more efficient, effective, and appropriately tailored regulation. While we've seen progress in tailoring the supervision, can you just tell us kind of overall how you've tried to move the entire department kind of in that direction?
Again, as FSOC, I have convening power, and so that would be, what you were describing would be done by the Federal Reserve regulation, the regulatory body. Vice Chair Mickey Bowman has done an excellent job, the Controller of the Currency and the FDIC. We have tried to get them aligned in what they are doing and for tailoring, and to understand that the reason 50% of small and community banks have disappeared over the past 15 years has been because of a one-size-fits-all regulatory strategy, which clearly it does not.
Very good. Keep up the good work, and thank you for being here today, and I yield back, Chairman.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Wisconsin yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Georgia. Ms. Williams, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Hill and Ranking Member Waters, for having this conversation today, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for joining us. Mr. Secretary, you noted in your introductory letter to the 2025 FSOC report that the Council has formed a new Household Resilience Working Group that will focus on American households' financial condition. Well, Mr. Secretary, as the Congresswoman for Atlanta, I'm here to make sure that that includes all families. As you know, that financially resilient households can better withstand shocks, maintain essential consumption, and avoid costly debt cycles. Discrimination in lending or in investment impacts growth opportunities for Black-owned small businesses, which means discrimination is, in fact, a threat to American financial stability. Atlanta has the largest racial wealth gap in the country. Supporting entrepreneurship and access to capital within the Black community can help close that gap, Mr. Secretary, but I need your help. Small businesses like those in the Fighting Fifth are critical to building and maintaining household wealth. Per Brookings from 2017 to 2022, the number of Black-owned businesses surged, representing over half of all new employer businesses. In 2022, Black-owned firms with at least one employee added $212 billion with a B in revenue to the economy and paid over $61 billion in salaries. More broadly, over the last 10 years, minority business entities comprised approximately 50% of new businesses started in the United States and created 4.7 million jobs. According to the U.S. Census, there are over 9.2 million minority-owned companies in the U.S., employing 8.7 million workers and generating more than $1.8 trillion in annual revenue. However, Mr. Secretary, there are significant barriers blocking sustainability and growth of Black entrepreneurship. That's why I launched a Small Business Advisory Council in my district to hear directly from small business owners in my district. Because access to capital, as we heard in all of the conversations, continues to be one of the biggest challenges that these small business owners face. The first major hurdle for Black entrepreneurs in starting their business is a lack of startup funds, equity, and collateral, a result of the racial wealth gap. During the Biden administration, the Minority Business Development Agency delivered $7.1 million in funding to Georgians through its business centers and capital readiness programs. But President Trump signed an executive order continuing the reduction of the federal bureaucracy, directing the destruction of the Minority Business Development Agency. Mr. Secretary, what steps has FSOC taken to assess the impact of discriminatory lending and investment practices on Black small business owners and the stability and growth of the economy overall? And how does FSOC factor discriminatory investment practices into its assessment of threats to our economy?
Again, we do not view that as a financial stability concern, but I do view it as a concern, and as I've repeatedly said, that we would be willing to work with you on tailoring for banks in your community to give them more lending power, because what we have seen is that with 50% of the small banks that have disappeared, I don't have empirical data, but I can tell you that my strong hunch would be that many of those would have been minority banks. So we would like to see more de novo banks, whether they are in Black communities in Atlanta, whether they are in Latino communities, whether they are in Asian communities.
So, Mr. Secretary, you don't think dismantling the Minority Business Development Agency had any impact on the U.S. economy at all?
Again, very difficult to tell in a complicated multivariable economy what impacts, whether it's good or bad, for the aggregate versus the individual.
Mr. Secretary, I'm here to be the voice of the people that sent me here, and I welcome you to join me in Atlanta, and I would love to introduce you to some of these small business owners that have been greatly impacted by this dismantling. Also, in the 2025 FSOC report, placed a premium on deregulation and demonstrates the administration's optimism about the use of AI to make financial institutions more efficient. As you noted, AI used properly could provide numerous benefits to financial institutions by enabling them to provide innovative services cheaper, faster, to a broader set of customers and under very economic conditions. For example, currently, some lending institutions are using AI to evaluate a customer's credit worthiness through alternative data, such as cash flow history. And I see my time is about to expire, but my question is, Mr. Secretary, what proactive steps does FSOC recommend regulators take to combat lending discrimination, which may be compounded through the use of AI, as banking institutions increasingly use AI to make lending decisions?
And
I would love that answer.
We invite the Secretary to respond to your question in writing.
Thank you.
We thank you both. Now recognize the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And first, Mr. Secretary, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership in helping get the Working Families Tax Cut bill across the finish line. And in particular, thank you for negotiating over the issue of SALT, the state and local tax deduction. That was a big win for the American people. A core goal of U.S. stablecoin policy is to keep dollar-denominated stablecoins issued, regulated, and supervised here in the United States rather than offshore. Today, a substantial and growing share of the dollar stablecoin market operates outside the U.S., as foreign jurisdictions move quickly to establish legal regimes that encourage dollar stablecoin issuance in their markets. Foreign-issued stablecoins already compete globally by offering consumers economic value and incentives to use and hold them, and countries like China are actively using economic incentives to drive adoption of their digital currencies. As Treasury implements stablecoin legislation, do you agree that U.S. rules should preserve enough flexibility for American issuers to remain competitive so dollar activity stays onshore, transparent, and under U.S. oversight?
Congressman, and again, I think, as you know, I used to have a house in your district.
Yes.
Given the tax regime in New York, I'm not sorry that I'm no longer there. I hope it will come back. It's a beautiful part of the world. With stablecoins, I would say what we want is U.S. best practices. The stablecoins can go around the world, and indeed we are seeing I believe we will see the adoption, especially in emerging economies, or maybe any other individuals who want to hold the U.S. dollar. But I think it is paramount, as was done with the Genius Act, to put in U.S. best practices.
Agree. Different topic. Fraud scams by bad actors are estimated to affect 15% of American homes, representing about 20 million American households in total. And given that losses to these scams often amount to $575, consumers face meaningful financial harm even from a single incident. At the same time, 37% of all U.S. households cannot cover an emergency expense of over $400 with cash or savings. And a fraud loss can be devastating to the average American. And these losses can lead to missed debt payments and damage to credit scores, which in some cases prevent home ownership. We've seen a renewed focus on fraud by this administration with the announcement of things like the Scam Center Strike Force, and I'd like to strongly encourage the administration to adopt an all-of-government approach to combating fraud and scams. Secretary Bessent, what role do you think Treasury should play in fighting scams and fraud, and does the FSOC committee have any initiatives planned for the coming year?
Yes, so Treasury, through FinCEN, was part of the group who took down the big scam centers in Asia. We were very focused on places like Laos, like Burma, like North Korea, and even Iran. And the other side of that, Congressman, is that it's used for nefarious. Once the money's stolen, not only has a U.S. citizen been hurt, but it's used for nefarious purposes. So we are constantly monitoring that, and we are working with our partners because, as you said, AI can be both a benefit, it can be both a blessing and a curse. So we think properly managed and rolling it out using private sector partners, we can cut down on that shocking number. I was not aware 15% of Americans are subject to it, but we've also got to be very careful because it will make malign actors more able to pull off bigger scams.
Yeah. Well, and kind of continuing on that front, there's been a growing concentration of cloud and AI model providers and the risk that results if a small number of firms control critical financial sector infrastructure. How is FSOC assessing the financial stability implications of this concentration, particularly in scenarios of an outage, cyber incident, or foreign-based remote access vulnerability? And I had introduced legislation that we passed recently through committee. The Remote Access Security Act ended up passing the House with strong bipartisan support. What steps is FSOC taking to ensure that financial institution reliance on third-party AI and cloud providers does not expose the system to remote access risks?
You'll need to answer that question in writing, Mr. Secretary. The gentleman's time has expired. Pursuant to the agreement with the committee and the Treasury Secretary, we'll have one more questioner because the Secretary has a hard stop at 1:30 p.m. And so the chair recognizes the gentleman from San Jose, California. Mr. Liccardo, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for testifying before us today. I know in addition to your many responsibilities, FinCEN comes under your duties as well in managing, and FinCEN has been very outspoken in this administration and other administrations in expressing concerns about alternative remittance systems, also known as, I think, informal value transfer systems. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
And there are many concerns, I know, with these alternative systems, including lack of documentation, anonymity, their informality make them very attractive to money laundering. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And in fact, in particular, Chinese money laundering organizations have been very effective at utilizing these systems to acquire access to U.S. currency in various ways for nefarious means.
We were very focused on Chinese money laundering organizations, which originally began as a way for Chinese citizens to get money out of the country. As China clamped down on the leakage, they morphed into partners with the Mexican drug cartels. So we are very focused on all of that.
I appreciate that, and I support that. I understand there has been some research, including published by the Government Accountability Office, a GAO report in 2016 and other studies as well that have found that fines and obstacles to remittances are not very effective at stopping the flow of remittances through in the aggregate, but in fact tend to push these remittances away from legitimate companies and remittance systems into these alternative systems. Are you familiar with some of that literature?
I'm familiar with that thinking.
This administration last year, through H.R. 1, imposed a tax on remittances in Section 4475. You're familiar with that, is that right?
I am.
And as you know, many residents of the United States depend enormously on these remittances, in many cases to keep their families alive in foreign countries, because it's pretty darn difficult to immigrate to the United States these days. You're familiar with the importance to so many residents of the United States to be able to have access to remittances.
I'm familiar with the difficulty coming into U.S. illegally since January 20th of last year, yes, sir.
And quite simply legally as well. I have residents in my district who have been waiting 20 years to get a green card, and they've been going through all the legal channels. So there are many obstacles, it's fair to say. Is that fair to say, Secretary?
I don't know the specific instances of your concern.
I invite you to my district, and you can meet the nearly 40% of my residents who are born in a foreign country that makes Silicon Valley the extraordinary place that it is, and they'll tell you their tales of woe in trying to get through this system. In January, you indicated, quote, "We will strongly push to prevent anyone receiving federal government support funds from sending money overseas." Is that right?
100%.
In reaction, a policy analyst at the Cato Institute said, quote, that these kinds of actions are building, quote, "building a legacy of financial surveillance and control." Do you recall that?
I don't read the Cato Institute, but I do believe in financial surveillance for the remittances that should not be remitted, and we should also know where the money's going.
And if you agree that imposing taxes and obstacles to using legitimate systems may compel people to use some of these informal mechanisms, don't you agree that undercuts our objectives in addressing money laundering, the illicit activity in these alternative systems?
I disagree with taxes.
But your administration and you supported that tax last year.
I disagree with your assessment that taxes can be a hindrance.
Don't you agree that taxes can alter behavior in various ways? When people understand something costs more, they may choose a different path?
I would say that they would choose the safest path.
Well, they may choose a less safe path if it just costs more to use the safe path. Don't you agree?
I believe that anyone who has legitimate income, is in the U.S. legally, and is sending money home through gains where they have paid taxes, they would choose the safest path.
Mr. Secretary, unfortunately, the data doesn't show what you suggest. It shows the opposite, and we're encouraging money laundering through these kinds of actions. These obstacles and these taxes are not helping American consumers.
Gentleman's time has expired. Appreciate the gentleman from California. I want to thank Treasury Secretary Bessent today for his testimony. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit additional written questions for the witness to the chair. The questions will be forwarded to the witness for his response. Mr. Secretary, please respond no later than March 11th to our questions. This hearing is adjourned.
Leader. I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Well, Mr. President, in a podcast interview released yesterday, Donald Trump called for Republicans to, quote, take over voting in 15 states in the country. Trump said, the Republicans should say, we want to take over. We want to take things over. Republicans ought to nationalize voting. Let me say that again, because it's hard to believe that a president of the United States, anyone who believes in democracy, anyone who believes in the Constitution, anyone who believes in this country would say it, but Trump said it. Trump said Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. This is more dangerous autocratic poison from Donald Trump.
Senator, we did dig in, and we are doing our investigation simultaneously with Congress. And just to put it in perspective, we've provided 700 documents on the Richmond Catholic memo specifically to this committee, whereas my predecessor provided 19 pages. And not only that, but we looked into how the source recruitment structure at the FBI was conducted during this time. And we made adjustments and permanent fixes to ensure that sources are not put into houses of worship unless there is an actual ongoing criminal or international terrorism threat. We will not use sources at this FBI to investigate and cull information just for the sake of culling information in houses of worship.
Has anybody been fired for this?
There have been terminations related to this and resignations.
Good. There need to be, because if this is going to be standard at the FBI, nobody can trust the FBI. You want to talk about violating the First Amendment? This has got First Amendment violation written all over it. It's one of the most revolting chapters in the FBI's history. And considering what we're seeing more broadly in terms of the acts of violence against people of faith, this has absolutely got to end, and the FBI has to lead the way. So I count on you to do that, Director. Let me just, in the minute or so that I have remaining, let me just shift gears and ask you about something else you said earlier. You said that protecting our youth is maybe the FBI's top priority. It's great to hear. Let me ask you about the role of AI chatbots in that, which you've talked about a little bit already today. Are you investigating any cases of AI-generated child sex abuse material? You issued a PSA earlier this year warning that synthetic child sex abuse material, that's where the AI generates it using maybe a real kid's image, but then generates sex material, sex abuse material. You warned that that was illegal under federal law. Is the FBI investigating any instances of this synthetic CSAM material generated by AI that you could speak to?
We are investigating dozens of those matters because, let me just say this, as far as the FBI is concerned, generative AI that produces CSAM, child sexual abuse material, under our investigative authorities is treated as equally as if it were actual child sexual abuse material. There's no difference for me in the FBI on this.
Let me just ask you one other thing in this vein. I'm sure you've seen the reporting that Meta's AI rules, their own internal guidelines, allowed their chatbots to have sensual, that's their word, sensual conversations with children. We've had instances, multiple instances of children, minors, taking their own lives at the behest of chatbots that instructed them with specificity on how to do it. What's the FBI's role here in investigating what is going on with these chatbots, with these AI companies encouraging? I mean, listen, if an actual person did that, we would say that's grooming. We would say that's child abuse. These companies are doing it. Their own guidelines allow it. What can we do about that?
You're referring to NVE, nihilistic violent extremism, and the 764. It has been made a priority of the FBI because they are targeting children, and these chatbots and these generative AI are getting coupled with actual humans who are using them and releasing them because they can do the work faster and quicker than humans can and get into spaces like social media where humans have a difficulty in engaging. And what we're doing is treating any extension of generative AI as the criminal themselves. And we have, I think, I've got to get the number back to you, but over 1,000 investigations related to NVE. We've had numerous takedowns and arrests of 764 individuals. And we are educating, this may be the most important part, I'm directly engaging with the social media and media companies, the internet service providers, to find a way to shut down. There's nothing I can do at the FBI to force them to shut it down, but work with you in Congress to find a way to work with our partners to get that shut down permanently.
Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you, Chairman, for calling this hearing. I'm grateful we're continuing this committee's long tradition of oversight, and in particularly today, oversight of the FBI. Director Patel, thank you for being here. There's a number of issues I hope that we can speak to. I want to start by reading something you said to me during your confirmation hearing under oath. I have no interest, no desire, and will not, if confirmed, go backwards. There will be no politicization at the FBI. Then you looked me in the eyes and said there will be no retribution actions taken by the FBI should I be confirmed as director. I told you that in your office. I tell you that again today. I'm concerned that that's not what's happened, that since you took over as director, you've cleaned house or forced out senior leaders across the Bureau, in particular targeting those that worked on investigations of President Trump. The former acting director has just sued you for firing him for political reasons. So did a leader in the D.C. field office. And the well-respected leader of the Salt Lake City office was pushed out last month, leaving that office shorthanded at a particularly difficult time. I'm worried that these actions compromise the Bureau's ability to keep Americans safe. Hundreds of agents have resigned. You are lowering application standards to fill vacancies. You've reassigned large numbers of agents to work on immigration and street crime, issues other law enforcement agencies can handle, perhaps more effectively with the FBI. But I'm concerned that this compromises the Bureau's ability to address national security risks, uniquely its capability. In fact, you've shut down the Office of Integrity and Compliance, which makes sure that agents act in a lawful and ethical way, and reassign staff away from domestic terrorism investigations exactly at a moment I think we are all concerned about it. I also have to ask, you came before the Appropriations Committee in May and told us you wanted a $500 million budget cut for the FBI, literally an effort to defund the police. I am grateful for the work of the men and women of the FBI. They've done great work this year in Delaware, partnering with the Dover Police Department to support human trafficking victims, partnering with the Middletown Police Department on armed robbery and carjacking. And it's urgent, I think, that we fix the direction and the prioritization within the FBI. And I wish we could focus on those efforts today. But I'm seeing an FBI leadership more focused on social media clout and on political revenge than on fighting crime. Director, have you ever ordered that an FBI employee be terminated because he or she worked on an investigation into President Trump?
Senator, thank you. One quick correction for the record. There's 280 NV investigations. I gave the incorrect number to Senator Hawley. Thank you.
Understood.
As far as
a lot of your statement. I disagree with it, and I'm happy to address it. But the only way, generally speaking, an individual is terminated at the FBI is if they have violated their oath of office, violated the law, or failed to uphold the standards that we need them to have at the FBI.
So those who say that they've been fired because of working on investigations into President Trump are lying or misrepresenting?
Well, those matters are alleged in litigation, which is ongoing, so I can't comment on those specifically.
Could you comment on why you fired former acting FBI Director Driscoll?
I can't because it's ongoing litigation.
Could you say now definitively under oath that the rank and file agents who were assigned to work January 6 cases will not be terminated because that's what they were assigned to do?
I've said it before and I've said it again. Your case assignment, as I was given case assignments when I was a young prosecutor, does not dictate your career or your termination.
Thank you. Then let me go to the appropriations question. In May, you testified before the subcommittee on which I serve, defending the president's request that we slash the FBI's budget by about $500 million. The day before, you testified the opposite in front of the House. Where are we in terms of the budget request? Senator Graham earlier said if you're requesting more funding for more agents, let us know. We're nearing the end of the fiscal year. In front of the committee on which I serve here in the Senate, your request was for a reduction of hundreds of millions of dollars. Where are we?
Where we are in the budget cycle is we at the FBI are in support of the president's budget, and we are in support of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. We've already identified tens of millions of dollars of duplicative contracts that the FBI was spending on software and private sector engagements. We've also identified duplicative workloads. So we are transitioning those folks out of doing the same thing twice over and into the field. And that's my focus right now. And the move of the FBI headquarters is also going to save the FBI $3.5 billion in the American taxpayers. So we're focused on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. And as I told Senator Graham, if I'll go back and talk to my team, and if we need more, we'll let you know.
Are you planning any additional reductions in force, Director?
No.
How many vacancies are you currently trying to fill within the agency?
In terms of the 1811 ranks, there's a few hundred open vacancies that we have funded. And so we're filling all of those with our hybrid 1811 program and our new recruitment program, and I think a lesser amount of IAs and SOS.
So if hundreds of agents have retired or taken the fork in the road offer, and you have vacancies, but you're requesting $500 million less, how does having fewer FBI agents help you tackle violent crime and address our national security issues?
Just to put it in perspective,
cybersecurity
Senator,
issues?
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If we had this $500 million, we've done the math. It would take us 14 years to onboard every vacancy that's on the books currently at the FBI because we can't hire these folks and train them overnight. It's a years-long process. So we are currently focused on recruiting the best and filling the positions to the best of our needs. And we, even if we had this extra money, wouldn't be able to hire them overnight. We're looking for where the need is greatest, where in the country we need to send them, and how we can change the training requirements, which is why I'm thrilled to have police officers. They might not have a college degree, but they got the street smarts and the cop smarts to become FBI agents, and that's what we want.
Let me turn to Section 702.
Yes, sir.
When you testified in front of the CJS subcommittee, we talked about this issue. You told me you were in favor of reauthorizing FISA Section 702 when it expires next year, so long as the reforms implemented last year, reforms like better training for agents and real consequences for inappropriate searches of Americans' communications, were maintained. You also said that you had some ideas about how to make Section 702 better going forward. Can you give me an update on the FBI's implementation of these reforms and the direction you think it should go?
Absolutely. I think you're referring to the query process, and if you're not, let me know. But any instance of abuse or mistakes that were made in the query process have now been changed. It used to be you can make multiple mistakes and continue to access the query database system. I've changed that. If you make a mistake, you're immediately sidelined, a review is conducted. And if it was an actual mistake, i.e., there should have been S on the end of that name and there wasn't, then we put you back in. But we have to review those matters. So that's happening. And if there was an intentional mistake, you have no more access to the 702 query system and its database. So we've also done an audit of the entire 702 system and the query databases. And now we are nearly 100% of the audit. And I think we found one or two, I'll have to get back to you, quote unquote mistakes within that system, which are currently being reviewed.
Thank you. You had told me in May that you'd send me updated statistics about the Section 702 searches of Americans' data. I haven't received it. When will I get that?
I'll work with my team to get that to you, Senator.
And frankly, in May, when you were testifying that you were implementing these reforms, you were also closing down the Office of Internal Auditing at the FBI. Now, that was the office created in the first Trump administration to improve the Bureau's compliance with Section 702. How is that working out? How can you continue to advocate for robust civil liberty protections, but shut down the office that was created to enforce those safeguards? Help me understand this.
Absolutely, Senator. This is a great example of sort of duplicative work. Both, there was 2 divisions in the FBI working on this, and all we did was the inspection division, which is the leader in this query system and this audit system, has now been given the single source mandate to conduct these. So the OIA, its elimination is just taking folks who were working there and were experts in it and folded in under the inspection division, and then taking other folks that we didn't need because we had enough manpower and pushing them elsewhere in the FBI.
I'm concerned about the rise in threats against members of our judiciary. What are you
Yes, sir.
doing with the U.S. Marshal Service to help protect our federal judges and with state and local judicial systems to help provide some of the expertise of the FBI in protecting them as well?
I share your concern, Senator. We have 35 open investigations, 17 against federal judges, and the remainder against state court judges and threats that they have received. And as you know, federally, there's a specific statute which prohibits that. So we are working up those cases and referring them to prosecution where we can meet the threshold for evidence.
In your written testimony, you referenced how counter-UAS legislation expires and we need to resolve the conflict in jurisdiction and authority. I agree, this is an urgent concern. I have heard from state and local law enforcement about it, from the folks responsible for major events, whether it's sports or concerts or public events. Given the tragic increase in political violence, I'm very concerned about the misuse of drones and the potential of there being a catastrophic event. What could we do to address this challenge?
Well, obviously, reauthorizing the capabilities that we have under the Counter-UAS program. But just to highlight what the FBI is specifically doing, we've been given the mandate to work with DHS to secure not just the Club World Cup that we had, by the way, which occurred in 32 matches across the country without any significant incident, which we're proud of, and we're taking that model for the next World Cup and also the Olympics. But the reason I bring that up is because we pushed out our counter-UAS programs to address the security needs, and that's where our focus is on events like that.
Mr. Director, thank you for your testimony. I look forward to working on actually solving criminal problems and reducing the extent to which what we're going back and forth about is more political and partisan point scoring and more actually solving crimes for the American people.
Yes, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
Mr. Director, you and the FBI working with state and local law enforcement officials in Utah have caught the assassin of Mr. Charlie Kirk. Is that right?
We have a suspect, yes, sir.
And you did that within 48 hours, did you not?
33 hours.
33 hours. Congratulations. We've had other political assassinations. Back in June, an assassinated Representative Melissa Hoffman, Mr. Hoffman, Senator John Hoffman, and Mrs. Hoffman in Minnesota. You and the FBI and Minnesota state and local law enforcement officials caught the assassin within 48 hours, did you not?
I believe that timeline's correct, Senator.
Congratulations. Sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. Good work. Did Mr. Kirk's assassin act alone?
As I've said since the beginning, Senator, it is very much an ongoing investigation, and I can't speak to the state charges. That's for the state to address on their own, but we are providing them with the same investigatory findings reporting the department. And as I noted to Senator, I believe it was Cornyn or Hawley, that there are a number of individuals that are currently being investigated and interrogated, and a number yet to be investigated and interrogated specific to that chat room. So we are very much in our ongoing posture of investigation.
So others could have been involved?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I asked you this last time you were here. Cash, you remember Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Strzok was an FBI agent. Ms. Page was an FBI lawyer. They were both very aggressive anti-Trump political activists who allowed their political opinions to affect their work at the FBI. Is that a fair statement?
I believe their text messages and their testimony that was secured by the OIG and DOJ speak for themselves.
In fact, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page were having an extramarital affair, and at one point, Ms. Page texted Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right?" And Mr. Strzok replied, "No, he won't. We will stop it," end quote. Ms. Page resigned from the FBI. Mr. Strzok was fired. They promptly sued the federal government and the FBI and Justice Department for releasing their emails, which revealed all of this. The FBI settled that lawsuit for $1.2 million, gave Mr. Strzok $1.2 million cash, gave Ms. Page, who resigned. She wasn't fired, she resigned, she quit. Gave her $800,000. Who, if the FBI made that decision to give them money?
That settlement was reached in the Biden administration when my predecessor was the director.
Who? Are you saying that Chris Wray did?
The only people that can decide that settlement are the Attorney General in conjunction with the director and the administration.
Okay, so you're telling me that Attorney General Garland and Director Wray decided to give them the money? Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, when you took over the FBI, did you find instances of where, under the Biden administration, the FBI had weaponized the agency to push the political beliefs of President Biden?
Sorry, the last part?
When you took over the FBI, did you find instances of where the Biden administration had politicized the FBI to prosecute its political agenda?
Well, I won't speak for other people. Haven't been a target of that weaponization, haven't been a staffer on the House Intelligence Committee, having had the Justice Department weaponized against me for making the findings and leading the investigation of Russiagate. I know what that feels like, and that's why as the FBI director, I'm committing to not ever have that ever happen again, but I'm also committed to fully investigating what was done, and that matter is still ongoing.
So I take it your answer is yes.
Yes, sir.
And you're firing those people, is that right?
Anyone that politicizes their job at the FBI will not work at the FBI.
Okay. You've heard some of my colleagues either implicitly or otherwise suggest that you have politicized the FBI to prosecute the political beliefs of President Trump. Is that true?
I don't know how that can be true when the stats that I cited, to include the 23,000 arrests, 6,000 weapons seized, 1,600 gang and criminal enterprise organizations, 4,700 children found and rescued, more enough fentanyl seized to kill a third of America. The men and women of the FBI are now on an apolitical mission, and this is why the numbers are historic in 7
Have you
months.
fired people because they voted for Vice President Harris?
I don't ask people who they vote for, and neither does the FBI.
Okay. But you've given people polygraphs, have you not?
Many people in the FBI take polys.
The FBI does that all the time.
Yes, sir.
Does it not?
Yes,
For
sir.
a long time, is that correct?
Decades.
All right. I want to ask you about the Epstein files. Have you seen the Epstein files?
I have not reviewed the entirety of it myself, but a good amount.
Would it be fair to say that Mr. Epstein trafficked young women, including, in some instances, minors, for sex to himself?
That was specifically the allegations in the 2018 indictment in the Southern District of New York.
Okay. Who else did he traffic these young women to?
In terms of what the investigation, again, going back to 2008, Mr. Acosta, who limited the investigation and limited the search warrants and limited the parameters of the investigation, the only thing we are able to speak to publicly, because he was given a non-prosecution agreement by Mr. Acosta, is that first time period from, I believe, don't quote me on this, 97 to 2001-ish. And then when the Trump administration courageously reopened it.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm going to run out of time. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself?
Himself. There is no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one
For the information that we have
in the files?
in the case file.
Okay. Now, President Trump has deferred to the FBI and the Department of Justice with respect to the Epstein records. He says it is your call about releasing them. And I understand that the department and the agency have decided to release them in cooperation with the House committee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So you're releasing them a little bit at a time. Is that correct?
We're releasing as much as we can, but we are limited by 3 different court orders, and the department went back to each of those judges to waive those court orders or have them lifted, and each of those judges declined.
Will you release all of them, or at least as many as you can?
We will release everything we are legally permitted to do so. We are continuing to work with the House on the subpoena request. We have substantially complied with it, but we will continue to release whatever we are legally permitted to do so.
Okay. I strongly encourage you to do that. Cash, this issue's not going to go away. And I think the essential question for the American people is this. They know that Epstein trafficked young women for sex to himself. They want to know who, if anyone else, he trafficked these young women to. And that's a very fair question. I want to know that answer. And I think you're going to have to do more to satisfy the American people's understandable curiosity in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, may I just respond to that? I agree, Senator. And what we have done, and just to remind folks, the Epstein case files existed in the 2 prior administrations, in the Obama administration and the Biden administration, and they didn't release anything. And there was President Trump in the first administration that renewed charges against Mr. Epstein. And I know it's a little complicated to understand, but what exists in the Epstein case files was a direct result of the limited search warrants from 2006 and 7, which hamstrung future investigations because of the non-prosecution agreement. And multiple administrations had the opportunity to look at the entirety of that case file and recommend prosecutions against anyone that was trafficked under Mr. Epstein and anyone that participated in that trafficking. And the only person to bring charges was the prior administration against Mr. Epstein. Now, I am not saying that others were not trafficked and others were not involved. What I am telling you is that based on the information we have, and we have continuously and publicly asked for the public to come forward with more information. If there is, we'll look at it. But based on credible information, we have released all credible information, and the information that the Department of Justice and the FBI never releases is information on investigations that are not credible. And we don't release the names of victims who weren't credible But in the same time, we don't release the names of victims who were credible. And so that's by law. And so the information we are releasing now is historic, and it is also to the maximum capacity that the law allows. And I know that's not going to satisfy many, many, many people. But if they wanted it done right, then the investigation from its origination should have been done right, and he should not have been given a get-out-of-jail-free card to do jail on the weekends for 12 hours a day, and he should have been investigated fully for the entirety of his crime and criminal enterprise, not just from 1997 to 2001.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, thank you for being here today. You'll recall well in January at your confirmation hearing before this committee, I raised the prospect of politically motivated retaliation, and you promised me, as you did other members of this committee, quote, every FBI employee will be held to the absolute same standard and no one will be terminated for case assignments. You went on to tell me, quote, all FBI employees will be protected against political retribution. And you assured one of my colleagues that you would honor the internal review process of the FBI. I'm not going to mince words. You lied to us. In the short time that you've been FBI director, you've presided over a rash of retaliatory firings. 3 FBI agents have recently sued you. They are FBI agents with 60 years between them of distinguished service, rescuing hostages, saving kids from predators, dismantling drug cartels, and their allegations, their civil allegations, are a searing indictment of your tenure as FBI director. But it's not just those 3. The FBI Agents Association has said that your actions, quote, distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers, either now or under the next administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau, end quote. This association, as you know, is voluntary. It represents 14,000 members, 90% of all the active agents. These are your employees saying that your performance has been unqualified and unfit. And there is mounting evidence that these retaliatory firings were the result of direction from the White House. There have been instances in the past history of the Bureau of political interference and political direction from the director's office, but not the kind of institutional interference that we're seeing from the White House right now. I'm going to ask you, has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
I completely disagree with your entire premise that I have lied or am misleading the FBI. If I were, the results that I announced today by the men and women of the FBI and the historic records we are doing to keep this country safe would not be possible. The men and women of the FBI are responding to our leadership and this administration's priorities. The only way people get terminated at the FBI is if they fail to meet the muster of the job and their duties, and that is where I will leave it. And you accusing me of lying is something I don't take lightly, but I'm not going to get into a tit for tat with you.
Well, let me just ask you to answer my question. Has anyone from the White House contacted you about personnel decisions?
Generally speaking, we always discuss with the White House, OMB, during the budget process, how many personnel we need, who we need where.
Answer is yes.
For budgetary purposes and
to fire people, agents, because they participated in investigations of the president?
I don't receive directions to do that.
Has anyone
I make the
suggested it?
decisions.
Has anyone asked you to do it? The best information is, yes, you've taken suggestions and direction from the White House in firing qualified agents.
Any termination at the FBI was a decision that I made based on the evidence that I have as a director of the FBI, and it's my job, and I'm not going to shy away from it. And as you stated, those are allegations, and that is an ongoing litigation. So they'll have their day in court, so will we.
The allegations are not just in that lawsuit, Director Patel, and I think your testimony confirms that, in fact, you've taken direction from the White House in those retaliatory firings.
It literally does
Because you've
not.
acknowledged that, in fact, they have been in contact with you about personnel decisions.
The White House
move
has
on.
been, do not put words in my mouth, we're on the record. The White House, like any administration, contacts its agencies on the budgeting process and where it needs personnel and where the mission priorities are. That always happens. If they didn't do that, they would be abdicating their responsibility to law enforcement. I will always work with my partners in the chain of command at the Department of Justice and the White House to ensure that this FBI is delivering the results we are delivering, to include the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history, to include the most fentanyl seizures in modern U.S. history, to include the most lives saved and the most children found in modern
ask
U.S.
you,
history. That is a working FBI. That is not a failing FBI.
Let's move on to a related area. In White House discussions, have you been asked or directed by the White House or others to engage in a crackdown on political groups or organizations, nonprofits, after the murder of Charlie Kirk?
To direct at political organizations? No. I've been asked by my chain of command to properly root out criminal activity wherever it is in whatever investigation we are conducting, and that's what we're doing.
Have those distinctions about whom you're going to target been based on direction from the White House?
Nobody gives me a list on who to target. My targeting list is from the men and women at the FBI.
Have you talked about investigating certain groups, nonprofits, or foundations or institutions?
Whatever those investigations are, they're ongoing, and I'm not going to get into those.
Have you used polygraphs to determine loyalty of agents?
No.
Have you committed that you will respect the First Amendment rights of agents?
I have wildly committed to respecting the First Amendment rights of agents, but at the FBI, you have to balance your First Amendment rights with your mission.
Have you imposed any sort of loyalty test in the course of using polygraphs or in any of the other personnel decisions?
Polygraphs have been utilized at the FBI for decades. They will continue to be utilized in the fashion by the professionals that administer them.
Have you asked under the polygraph test about individuals' loyalty or about their voting records or any kind of past statements?
Just to make it abundantly clear, I don't tell the professionals how to conduct polygraphs or what questions to ask. They make those decisions. And I, as the director of the FBI, never ask anyone who they voted for.
Have you investigated donors to a political party simply because they are donors?
Simply based on that fact alone, no.
Have you investigated donors for another reason?
Many donors may be involved in criminal enterprises and criminal activities, and those individuals will be investigated.
Can you commit to make public the Epstein files that so far have not been released if this committee is able to review them on a classified basis?
I think this is an important distinction. The Epstein case file is not classified, to my understanding. So we are providing what we legally can, and we are going to give Congress what we are legally permitted to do so to the maximum extent of the law.
Will you enable the chairman and the ranking member to review them on a classified basis?
That doesn't make any sense. If the material in the Epstein file is not classified, there is no basis for a
Well, it
classified
would
review.
protect the confidentiality of them if they were able to review them on a classified basis.
If anyone in this room can get the multiple district court judges to lift their court protective orders in the ceilings, we will happily provide you with more information.
Are you in favor of merging the DEA and the ATF?
That's not something for me to comment on.
Well, those agencies work with you, don't they?
with me, not for me.
Are you in favor of orienting the FBI toward a national police function as opposed to the enforcement of federal law?
The FBI does enforce federal law across the country. That's what we do.
But isn't it a fact that you have told the leadership of the FBI that you view it as moving toward a local and state police function?
No, we are prioritizing working with our local and state partners, and they will tell you that that has never happened with this much engagement in the history that they have been serving as local law enforcement officers. I believe local cops are the best intelligence source and the best understanding of their communities, and I folded in my FBI agents under that direction to work with them to get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For the fourth time today, I want to remind people that my oversight has made clear that Director Wray's FBI was politicized. I've released a trove of records to prove it, not only today, but in past days. I've also said some FBI personnel who have been fired, retaliated against my whistleblowers, and I don't remember my Democratic colleagues defending my whistleblowers when their careers were ruined. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into the thrust of my comments and questions, Director, I want to thank you. In our meetings prior to your confirmation, during your confirmation, we talked about your desire to get more agents out into the field, out of Washington, and take on violent crime. And you fulfilled that. St. Louis received the largest permanent per capita infusion of FBI agents anywhere in the country. And I know it's not only an isolated event, but we certainly appreciate your honoring your commitment to do that. And I know there's a lot of great opportunities ahead to take on violent crime, which you've highlighted many of the successes in your introductory comments. It's obviously no secret that this hearing takes place in the wake of a horrific American tragedy, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. For those of us who knew him, I know you did too. It's still sort of difficult to put into words what a tragic loss that is, not just for his family, but for our country, for free speech, for a belief that we can have a free exchange of ideas. And he was quite literally shot in the throat in an attempt to silence him and take his life. And so you have this task now of this investigation. There's been an arrest. But I think that we face an even larger crisis that law enforcement alone can't tackle alone. It's a crisis that has culminated in the assassination of Charlie. But it doesn't end there. It's I think every bit present right now, and the challenge is greater than quite frankly, I would have imagined. Seeing some of the comments that have taken place after the assassination, and something that I think as a country we have to reckon with. And it's something deeper, much deeper than a rejection of law and order or the norms of civil society. We've entered a very dangerous time, I think, in our country. And that should be clear to everyone. Political violence is a sign of a deep and corrosive sickness in any society. But in America today, the problem is just not political violence in the abstract. It is the specific kind of political violence which is overwhelmingly driven by a specific set of actors and groups. None of this emerged out of thin air. Over the past week, leaders from across the political spectrum have come out and forcefully condemned Charlie's murder and political violence more broadly. For that, we're all very grateful. We should be grateful. There have been calls to unite and come together in the wake of Charlie's murder, and I want to do that. I do. Someday I pray that we can be united as a country again and go forward together as a one people and under one flag, but we are not united. Upstream from the dehumanization and demonizing political violence and rhetoric tearing apart our country is a divide on how we view America and Americans. Is America good? Is America evil? Is there something inherently special about Western civilization, or is this 2,000-year project rotten to the core? And if it is something worth fighting for, which I believe, how do we do it? With words and ideas like Charlie did, or with firebombs and assassins' bullets? Political violence is always wrong. Period, full stop. It doesn't matter which side, in the name of any ideology or cause, it's wrong. But in America today, political violence is not a problem that falls equally upon both sides. We have to be honest about this. We must reject an attempt to paint it as some kind of random phenomenon with no particular creed or ideology, a kind of spontaneous insanity, which takes place outside of any broader social context and has no pattern at all. That's wrong. So free speech, yes. Political violence, no. But we have to be honest about what's happening. Already, we're hearing people talk about Charlie's assassination in those terms. We're told that we can't possibly know what drove a killer to plan and carry out a murder of the most prominent conservative activist in America. But that's a lie. We do know. The facts are plain and clear, and we have to speak truth in this moment, or there's no other side of the mountain. The vast majority of Americans are against political violence, but there is a vocal, active minority that encourages and celebrates it, and that minority is overwhelmingly on the left. Just last week, a YouGov poll found that a full 25% of those people who describe themselves as very liberal say it can be justified for citizens to use violence to achieve political goals. Less than 3% of very conservative Americans say the same. That's too many. That is 3% too many. But we are lying if we think that this is a both sides thing. It's not. We have to confront it. And you're going to have an important job of rooting out these terrorists. This is an ideology that runs very deep. The numbers are virtually identical to the ones I just noted when it comes to whether or not it's okay to celebrate the deaths of people whom we disagree with. And while large majorities in both parties were opposed to celebrating political violence, Democrats overall were nearly twice as likely as Republicans to believe that it is usually or always acceptable to celebrate the death of a public figure they oppose. What in the hell is going on? Earlier this year, a poll found that more than 55% of people on the left believed that it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Donald Trump. These are not just some abstractions on a page. These are our fellow citizens. How can we come together with people who believe these things? We've all seen the flood of posts on social media over the past week, not just a fringe few, but thousands upon thousands of people gleefully celebrating a father of two young children getting gunned down in broad daylight. I wish I wouldn't have seen that video. I wish my kids would not have seen that video. Blue Sky, the left-wing alternative to X, was so overwhelmed with these posts that the platform was forced to issue a statement warning its users to stop glorifying the murder. And it wasn't just random social media trolls. It was journalists, elite college professors, and even politicians, all but saying Charlie's assassination was justified because of what he thought, because of what he said. We saw the flood of hit pieces, the most powerful media outlets in the nation dishonestly attacking and villainizing Charlie for the most vicious possible terms. How can you ask us to unite under that? There can be no unity between good and evil. Somebody has to win this thing. And as a country, we have to absolutely reject it. And don't tell me it's both sides. It didn't happen in a vacuum. Over the past decade, we've seen an explosion of political violence, not just one-off lone wolf attacks, but organized, systemic political violence at a mass scale. It is not organic. It is the offspring of a dark and clandestine system funded in part with our own tax dollars, winning with a large network of foundations, NGOs, activist organizations, and front groups. This system lurks behind every radical leftist movement in our nation today. The George Soros empire has financed a vast ecosystem of radicals, all working together, dropping off bricks at riots to unleash a tidal wave of violently anarchists on our streets and to prop it up in an army of researchers and experts and journalists and propagandists who downplay the political violence.
What he's doing is serious.
I'm going to ask you, because I don't have a ton of time,
The opposite of what we should be doing as a committee.
and I would point out, we've heard years of the left, their loudest voices calling anyone on the right extremists, MAGA Republicans, fascists, Nazis, an existential threat to democracy. Check yourself, and don't give me this both sides bullshit. Mr. Director, I want to ask you, tell me if each one of the following perpetrators or alleged perpetrators were acting from a left-wing or right-wing political violence. The man who tried to kill Republican congressman at the congressional baseball practice, nearly killing House Majority Leader Steve Scalise, left-wing or right-wing violence?
Sir, I believe it was a left-wing ideology.
Okay. Burned down cities during the Summer of Love in the George Floyd riots, left-wing violence or right-wing violence?
Sir, I'll rely on you on these. I don't have off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, left-wing. The Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre, left-wing or right-wing violence? Left-wing. The Lee Zeldin stabbing attempt, left-wing or right-wing? Left-wing. The Covenant school shooting in Nashville, left-wing or right-wing? Left-wing. The Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt on President Trump, left-wing or right-wing? Left-wing. The Trump International West Palm Beach assassination attempt, left-wing. The Abundant Life Christian school shooting, left-wing. The United Care CEO's murder, left-wing. Tesla's burned, keyed, damaged, firebombed, left-wing. The murders at the Israeli embassy, left-wing. The ICE facilities firebombed, left-wing. The Minnesota Catholic school shooting, left-wing. The anti-white Charlotte and North Carolina stabbing, left-wing. The attempted Utah News State firebombing, left-wing. And now, of course, the culmination of this vile trend, a left-wing assassination of Charlie Kirk. So don't give me this both sides. If we want to get to unity, let's be honest. Let's be honest. Free speech, yes. Political violence, no. But let's be honest.
Senator Hirano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, just like the rest of the federal government, there have been significant personnel changes at the FBI since President Trump took office. I want to better understand the scope of the turnover and the changes occurring at the FBI. Since January 2025, how many FBI employees have retired, resigned, been fired, or otherwise separated from employment? I need a number.
We'll get you a number.
What is the number? You don't have it?
Not off the top of my head, and I want to get you the right number.
Would it surprise you to know that it's probably in the thousands, like 5,000?
I don't think that number's
Well,
accurate.
you don't know. Next question. How many special agents or analysts have left or been fired from the FBI since January 20th, 2025?
Say, we will get you the numbers, and anyone that retires is of their own volition, and anyone that is terminated at the FBI, as I've said before, is done so because they have failed to meet the standards and uphold their loyalty and oath to the Constitution.
Yeah, so you say. Next question. How many executive assistant directors, or special agents in charge have left or been fired from the FBI since January 20th, 2025?
Again,